Hey, team players, welcome back. We are here on Wednesday with a working microphone this time, and more importantly, Bob is not at jury duty. So we get all that fun stuff, everyone breaking out what the day is going to be, and it's going to be amazing. The Bucks just activated half of their receiving core, and it's the start of the playoff week. All of these guys that we've been excited for to get your playoff runs on starts now. Let's do this. Local football flavor. And no intro, but that's fine. We got technical difficulties going everywhere here, Bob. Another difference here. But start off with the questions. Fire them up, Bob, because I can't see them right now.
Well, hey, it happens. It happens.
It's happening.
All right, guys, welcome. And I just like to start out with congratulating everybody that was able to make the playoffs. I know at times it gets a little dodgy with making these decisions, but ultimately it feels good when we make it. It sucks when we don't make it. It happens all around. So thank the fantasy gods, and you could thank the fantasy gods or just thank yourself for, some incredible sit decision-making decisions that you had there, Jonathan. Quick hit here. Looking for week 16, how would you rank these tight ends? Waller, Pitts, Juwan, and Mike Gesicki. So I've been looking into this before we went live, Jonathan. And I have a couple different opinions about this. And I just kind of want to go through them. So it's going to be slightly a little bit longer. So first and foremost, I think we all understand that at this point in time, week 16, we should be prioritizing anybody that starts against Cincinnati. Cincinnati has allowed on a per game or on a total basis over the last 4 games, 46 targets to tight ends, 536 yards, which is the highest amount out by 200 yards in terms of receiving yards. If you take that out to the last 10 games, of course, it's 108 targets for 1,080 yards, which blows the nearest competitor out by 300 yards.
I mean, that's 100 yards a game on that point.
So when you look at it, the decision here is, everybody's going to want to start Darren Waller. And everybody's going to want to start Darren Waller because he faces Cincinnati. But I just want to throw out there another name, and it's Greg Dulcich. The reason I want to throw out Greg Dulcich.
Bob, Waller's playing in Miami. They're playing at Pittsburgh this week.
Yeah, and I'm going to get to that too. But when we look at week 16, this is a question about week 16, not week 15. So when we look at week 16,
you people with buys are so special and awesome.
Waller and Dulcich both play for Miami. And what we can glean from stats so far is that Waller seems to be a guy that could be a touchdown kind of have that touchdown bonus kind of upside, right? Now, when we look at Waller on the whole, he's a little bit older, possibly a little bit slower, depending on how you view his play style. And that we see a player that over the last couple of games whose average is pretty good as well. So we take a look at these two Miami players, Dulcich and Waller. They're both getting about the same targets a game on average. So what I see here in this example, right? If we look on a per game basis, is Cincinnati is allowing overall in the last 4 games around 11.5 targets per game to tight ends. So if you are to split that down the middle, okay, and let's say that both Waller and Dulcich get the same amount of targets in this game, you're going to have a pretty good to average tight end game, despite them being the best matchup for tight ends on the slate. Now, if Dulcich or Waller were to get the entirety of that complement of snaps,
it's a home run.
If that were to go 70-30, that's the one that you would want. Projectably, it's very hard to say that Waller or Dulcich is the better play in that situation. I think it's a toss-up. You roll the dice. Dulcich seems to be a more interesting play because everybody's shooting for Waller. But I see benefits in both. Now, when we get to Juwan Johnson and Pitts have no target competition within that same frame, right?
Yeah.
When we look at Juwan, and hopefully this helps out any other questions along the way about week 16 tight ends.
The Saints passing game is amazing in week 16.
So when we look at it and we see, okay, well, we look at week 16, New Orleans plays the New York Jets. When we look at the Jets on the totality of the last 4 games, the Jets actually don't offer a lot of targets to tight ends. If you project them in a different direction here, they also net, it's not as great for tight ends. But because Juwan is a target in this offense and has been getting on average about 5 to 6 targets per game, that is still a pretty good projection for him. He will hit that average and he will get around 50 yards. The problem is that the Jets are not allowing a lot of touchdowns to tight ends. That's the market where Cincinnati, where you're like, oh, okay, that's the market that I want to be in. Then when you go to Pitts, for example, Pitts is playing Arizona. So looking at those stats, Arizona is offering around 15 points per game over the last 4 games to tight ends, but they're only doing it on about 6 targets. Where they're getting beat by tight ends is in the touchdown market. So you have to ask yourself, is Pitts more likely to get the touchdown there? And then Gesicki, on the flip side of things, Miami is also offering a lot of targets to tight ends as well. With Joe Burrow back, they're offering over the last 4 games around 9.7 targets per game, with an average around 68 receiving yards. So not as high as Cincinnati. But if T. Higgins is out, because T. Higgins just got another concussion, it is reasonable to project that Mike Gesicki will be within the same range as a Darren Waller or a Greg Dulcich.
Well, on the Gesicki front, Bob, I want to put this out here. Gesicki is going to match in 16 whatever he does in 15 in terms of their usage. The Cincinnati offense, and I know that the mic cut out on Monday when I was breaking this down, but the Cincinnati offense is at a major crossroads starting now. T. Higgins is out, and their also playoffs is officially dead. So what we're going to see is Burrow basically just playing for stats, playing for, holy shit, someone buy some season tickets in Cincinnati, because they do care about that.
So that's what I have to see.
But my point is, you're going to see if Cincinnati, I'm talking about Gesicki, you're going to see if Cincinnati's offense is going to phone it in and protect the shell or go all in. So my point is, Higgins is out this week and next week. Whatever you get from Gesicki this week, you're going to get in 16 and 17.
So if Higgins is out week 16, I think actually when you look at the totality of what you have on the menu, I think Gesicki is a better play than Waller week 16, even though the matchup against the Bengals is projectedly better for Waller. But because Gesicki, if Higgins would be out, that Gesicki would get more targets, I think it's a more reasonable play to do that. And to answer a couple of questions here.
So that was a quick hit. We turn to do a deep dive, and we will answer all your questions. We see him flying in here fast.
Just so you know, Michael, we are running it both in phone style and horizontal style. So you could catch both on YouTube on your phone. It just depends on which one you click on. I'm actually not sure which one. And going to this,
the vertical one has a little phone logo at the end.
Yeah. And I just want to go to this comment here. If London is out, and that's what I was getting to on week 16. We don't know yet about week 16 if London will continue to be out. But if London is out week 16, then I do think it's fair to say that Pitts will be an even better play than Waller that week, despite the juicy matchup, because I do think Greg Dulcich will eat into the targets that Waller can get. And that's why I worry about rolling Waller.
I always worry going with Pitts.
Feeling pretty good about my team besides the tight end spot, my flex spot, choosing between Sutton and Wandale. Going to let this week kind of be my deciding factor in who I start next week. I think you're still going to want to start Wandale in week 16.
Yeah.
Wandale has been getting a whole lot of targets ever since, Scadaboo went down. He's been an integral part of this offense. The only problem with Wandale is while the targets are there, the yardage is not always there, and we know that. So being in a full PPR league, I still do think and value that Wandale a little bit higher than Sutton in that regard. Titan, when it comes to this question here, your team is Dak and Burrow quarterback. Wide receivers are Pickens, Chase, and Jamo. Running backs are Saquon, Etienne, Swift, Vidal, Monangai, Marks, and Corum. And Bowers is your tight end. You have 2 flex, no tight ends, which is cool, half PPR. Should I drop Vidal for another wide receiver piece? I would say yes, And I would say yes, because I want to know who are the other wide receivers that you have available to you.
We can't just blanketly say cut Vidal because he's no longer in the pure cut list. He showed pretty decently in the first half of that game yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, he did. He had one reception for 60 yards, and that's cool. He did have a couple negative yardage runs, and that happens. That's okay. But I would say that I'll need to know what piece, because I think you have enough running backs to cover you.
Oh, he does.
And you don't need Vidal, and having that extra wide receiver piece, I think, will be very vital to your playoff push.
There is also something to keeping the guy who doesn't hurt you because he's on your bench. He can't hurt you on your bench.
Now, looking at this, do we like Dak or Burrow this week? And when we look at everything, I still do think that Baltimore...
Has he even cleared from his concussion yet? I didn't see that official answer.
I didn't see anything there. But what I will say is that everything that I said about Minnesota last week, when you guys were talking about it, I said that J.J. McCarthy was still trash. His stat line showed three touchdowns. He got 20 fantasy points, but he played still like trash against a very trash.
That must have been why my mic didn't work. It was the curse of J.J. McCarthy coming at us.
So Jaden Daniels also got hurt in that game, which then pivoted Mariota into the game. But by that point in time, the game was basically already over. Yeah. And so while I don't think that is something that is going to happen this week to Dak and to the Dallas Cowboys offense on the whole, I do favor Joe Burrow slightly more this week. Yeah. I like Dak in this position. I think that he could do very well. But the thing I like about Joe Burrow is just the fact that there are more possible passing attempts in this game in a potential shootout with Baltimore, where both quarterbacks are going to show that they've got the gas left. They want to show, even though the season didn't go as planned, narratively speaking, they're going to want to show that they can continue to perform.
I think Burrow's going to play for stats and basically be the quarterback of December. I still believe that.
Baltimore's defense has been playing well against quarterbacks over the last couple of weeks, a little bit better than they did prior to the beginning of the year. So what I do project is that both of these quarterbacks are most likely going to have 2 touchdowns, but I do think that Burrow finishes with more yards, because if the game gets out of hand against Minnesota and Dallas goes up with an early lead, they can end this game with Javonte Williams. Okay. Burrow is not the same. Period. Cincinnati can't. Yep. Cincinnati can't end the game with Chase Brown. So ESPN, better quarterback start, Dak or Purdy this week?
I'm still Dak compared to Purdy.
Again, I think that Purdy right now is a guy that I do want to consider starting over Dak this week.
I don't know about that.
The reason I want to consider starting him this week is that this Tennessee defense has not been any projectable way better 4 weeks ago than it is now.
Well, that's true. It has not improved. Not finding that at all.
One of the things that you can see over the last couple of weeks is that the net difference between, when you take good playing players versus average playing players, is that the fantasy points per game for the Titans is the highest on the slate. So when you can take average player performances versus like the best, it's a differential of like around 8 points. So they're on average over the last 4 games, over the last 2 games, they're offering the highest total to quarterbacks, 27. Over the last 4 games, they're offering the 4th highest total to quarterbacks, which is 22. They're offering around 31 passing attempts per game and around 250 to 270 passing yards per game with around 2 touchdowns, which is some of the highest in the league right now. So for me, the only thing that I have a concern about with Brock Purdy is that how many rushing touchdowns will Christian McCaffrey get? But because Christian McCaffrey is an beyond exceptional pass-catching running back, there is a good chance that Christian McCaffrey's well-being in this game could be cemented by Brock Purdy. I project Brock Purdy to have 3 touchdowns in this game with probably around 260 passing yards. I like that a little bit more than Dak this week, so I am pushing for Brock Purdy this week over Dak.
I'm still on Dak. There's something about a Minnesota team that quit. Now, granted, that being said, we had a really good conversation on Monday about how the Cowboys are pouting. and you don't necessarily have to get
Yeah,
that.
and it's playoff time, guys. So, KJ, we're going to get to your deep dive after we clear through a couple of quick hits here, but it is playoff time for everybody here. Better
That's
flex.
right. And we will answer all your questions, guys.
Flournoy, if CD is out, Christian Watson, Devin Singletary, or BTJ.
This is how far BTJ has fallen from the 11th pick to waiver wire disaster.
What do you think about it?
All right, so here let's start with Flournoy. He had an impressive game with CD out, but it also was essentially the first time that that's ever happened, and a big part of it was almost, what's the nice way of saying this, punishing Pickens for pouting. So I'm not sure that given a week of theoretically getting Pickens involved again, that I want to touch Flournoy. I might be completely wrong on that, but I don't want to touch what effectively is their fourth or fifth wide receiver on the Cowboys depth chart because there's too much of a talent gap between Pickens for him to get it again. So I saw what happened. Obviously, it's there. I of this grouping, it's going to be Watson because every time he gets the ball, he does something. It amazes me. It amazes me why they don't give him the ball more as well. But the fundamental fact is they scheme him well. LaFleur is a good guy. I still don't trust him at all. But for a flex, he's like the ultimate flex. He's an all-or-nothing guy that if he gives you a 4, it's not the end of the world, but he also could give you 4 touchdowns. He is the flex I want when we're talking about building the tail end of a playoff roster.
Yeah,
out of that group at least.
And while I think Devin Singletary is very interesting, and the reason I think Devin Singletary is very interesting in this matchup is because the Washington Commanders are not good.
He's the best floor of the group. There's no doubt about that. Singletary.
So for me, I really do think that Singletary has a chance to exceed his current projection this week. I do think that I would right now on Wednesday push for Christian Watson or Devin Singletary. The only thing that I worry about, like I said earlier, and like I've been saying all the time with Christian Watson, is that he's getting targeted a good amount, right? But the problem is that it's not enough for what you feel comfortable with.
That's right. And the floor could be too low.
So he's been exceeding expectations because, as you said, Joe, he is on pace for like getting a touchdown, almost on average, almost every week, right?
Yep.
There was one game where he didn't. His targets are sitting sometimes 10, sometimes 7, sometimes 5, sometimes 4. But against the Denver Broncos, they are going to have to open it up a little bit against the Denver Broncos. But the Denver Broncos are very good on defense. And it's going to be a challenge for all of the pass catchers for Green Bay in this game. But I do think that, all things considered, that he is clearly the guy that they want to get the ball to in money situations. I think that you do kind of want to lean on Watson and Devin Singletary for the same reason that I said about Flournoy and Dak, for example, is that there's a chance that by halfway through that game, if Dallas holds a big lead, that Javonte Williams will be able to ice that game out, and Flournoy will be involved, but not as much. So that would be my concern.
I think Flournoy is your playoff team.
I'm on Christian Watson if I need a ceiling. If I need a floor, I'm on Devin Singletary.
That's right. That's final answer.
Week 16, Bowers versus the Texans or Kincaid versus the Browns. All right, so let's get into this, Joe.
I think you have to go with Bowers because he is their whole offense.
I mean, that's fair.
I mean, we've seen Kincaid is definitely taking a prominent role stepping forward within Buffalo's offense. But the other part you got to recognize is lake effect snow. Obviously, it's 10 days from now, so who exactly knows, versus a dome. And that's the other fallback for why I think Bowers should pretty much be an easy one for you there.
So the only problem that you might have with this is that overall the Texans are not allowing any touchdowns to tight ends in the last 4 games. 0. So the Browns are. So if you're looking for a slightly bit of upside in that touchdown department, then you could lean on Kincaid because he will be a valuable piece of the offense moving forward. However, with that even being said, when you look at Bowers versus Cleveland, that's Kincaid. Kincaid versus the Browns is that yardage play as well. But when you look at Bowers versus Houston, what Joe said is absolutely true. It's inside. Now, we don't know the quarterback situation because Geno did get a little bit banged up in that game. So that's something to keep your eye on.
Well, you got George Pickens in the house.
I don't know if it improves or not. So that's kind of what we're looking at. Okay. So Bowers for the volume, I think. Kincaid, if you want a little bit of a touchdown upside in this game. I really don't see the Raiders scoring against the Texans at all.
And on a side note, guys, Bob and I were talking about this yesterday when we were talking about how we were doing all our best balls and preseason stuff. That matchup of Texans versus the Raiders, you want every piece of Houston you can get. I mean, it is going to be awesome.
All right, so one year here. Nix, Caleb, or Mariota at quarterback this week. So Nix, Caleb, or Mariota at quarterback this week. All right, so there's
almost has to be Nix.
There's a lot to take in there. I think
Caleb's at home, right?
When we look at things, Caleb is playing against Cleveland. Okay.
Oh, it doesn't even matter then. Yeah, you can't trust him in the wind on the lake.
So either way you dice it, that's going to be a pretty difficult matchup for Caleb.
Yeah, I'm actually more concerned about the weather than the defense he's facing.
Now,
that's how weak his arm is.
This is a stat to know. In the last 5 games, Caleb has only passed for over 200 yards twice. Okay.
And he's missed a lot of open receivers in the process as the wind is shifting the ball in the air.
That was against the Steelers, Cincinnati, or 3 times. Steelers, Cincinnati, and the Giants. Then we have Minnesota and Philly and Green Bay, which he did not pass over. So in the last 6 games, he's like basically 3 for 3 on that. So he's a real wild card when it comes to that. Bo Nix, on the other hand, Bo Nix has been, relatively speaking, airing it out. 212 yards, 321 yards, 295 yards, 150 yards.
Small world.
And this is the problem that I brought up with Bo Nix last week. So if you were with us last week, this is the problem that I brought up with Bo Nix, is that the only upside to Bo Nix on a weekly basis right now is that he might rush in for a rushing touchdown. He has not passed for more than 1 passing touchdown since the game against Houston 5 weeks ago.
That's a long time.
Okay, and before that against Dallas, he had 4 touchdowns. So the multi-touchdown games are not in Bo Nix's favor. He's also going up against one of the better pass defenses in the league because they are not allowing a lot of volume to the passer. So on average, over the last 4 games, Green Bay has only been allowing around 24 pass attempts per game. Now, Bo Nix has been taking 36 pass attempts to get to 200, 300 yards. So if they're not allowing him to do that, it is not going to be a good week for Bo Nix.
Well, the reason I look at this as game script, they're going to have to do this. Green Bay is going to score on him, and he's going to have to keep throwing it.
And that's fair. And there's a way that Chicago wins against Cleveland without having Caleb Williams involved. But
it's going to have to be. You can't cut the wind.
But Shedeur is a little bit of a wild card and maybe extends that game a little bit more. Mariota's out of the picture for me.
Absolutely.
I can't be on Mariota.
Absolutely.
On Nix or Caleb. I favor Caleb a little bit more because I think Caleb has more touchdown upside than Bo Nix overall. I do think the yardage total for Caleb is going to be less than Bo Nix, but I do think you're going to get a couple more touchdowns out of Caleb Williams in that game. So I lean Caleb. Joe leans Nix.
So, guys, we will answer all your questions. We're going to have to speed it up a little bit, Bob, because we are getting wildly snowballed.
I'm starting
right
Judkins and Anderson. Would you start Sutton, Devonta Smith, Swift, or Mike Evans over any of those guys? I could see a world where you don't want to start Judkins this week. I could see it. Would I do it? Probably.
I'm starting Judkins against the Bears.
Like I said, I could see it.
ETN's the one I would consider benching, even though he's on a hot streak right now. I just don't trust it.
I think he's too hot in a good matchup to ignore that. The Jets.
I don't trust the Jaguars.
And Joe, on average, over the last 4 games, the Jets have been allowing around 28 rush attempts a game to running
Oh, I
backs.
get it. The Jets will let you run all over them because they can't stop
plenty
it.
of
I just don't
opportunities.
trust the Jaguars. There's some people you just don't trust. I don't trust the franchise.
I mean, I get it. I get where you're lacking that trust from them. But I also understand that's 28 attempts. Now, on the other hand, Chicago's are allowing around 21 attempts with around 106 yards, which is fairly average for the league right now. So like I'm not starting Judkins. But again, there's a picture that you could paint that this game will get out of hand and they will not use Judkins. And then Henderson, I think, has to start for you. He was on a little bit of a hot streak beforehand. And then the week
and
prior,
rookie running backs off their bye tend to get a burst.
That's
where you get with Henderson.
I want to continue to invest in that. Now, when you say, would you start Sutton, Devonta Smith, Swift, or Mike Evans? I think you could convince me to start Swift over Judkins. I know it's a little bit weird to hear that and to say, but when I look at it over the last 4 games, right, there's been around 5 extra rushing attempts in the positive direction when we look at the average player versus the exceptional player that Cleveland has faced. Now, Cleveland's run defense was pretty stingy towards the beginning of the year, but they have been less stingy as the year has gone on.
They have.
There's around 25 attempts in that game that they could take advantage of. And DeAndre Swift has gone below 10 attempts one time in the last 5 games. So I do believe that there is a picture you could paint where DeAndre Swift would be a better start than Judkins this week. Would you ultimately come to that decision on Sunday? Probably not. Yep. But I do think that Swift is a better start than Judkins this week.
And I'm going to agree with that, Bob.
I do think that they're probably within a couple points of one another. Nothing exceptionally huge. Quincy, 14-0. Let's fucking go, Quincy. On the bye, plus I made it in the second league against the number 1 team. That's what I'm talking about, Quincy. 14-0, Joe.
Love it.
Wouldn't that feel good? Love it, Quincy. Congrats, man. What's happening there, Michael? And hopefully we cleared up that for you. Godwin or Burden this week? I think you got to go on Godwin a little bit.
I can't. Even with a broken Baker, I trust him more than a healthy Caleb.
And the reason
fundamentally that straightforward.
The reason I trust overall, the reason I trust Tampa a little bit more in this game is that Atlanta has not been good against wide receivers over the last several weeks. Now, depending on where Chris Godwin plays will really depend on how his output and performance is.
And he's going back to the slot. Evans is back.
And in general, this will affect all of the pass catchers. But when we look at the picture that's painted from the perspective of Atlanta, right, they're offering around 22 targets to wide receivers in this game. And if Baker Mayfield can hit, his kind of average, and be a little bit better than he has been over the last couple of weeks. Again, last week, 122 yards. That was shit. The week before that, 194 yards. The week before that, he got injured. Prior to that, 173 yards on 26 attempts. If he could get up to 30-ish attempts, I think that the wide receivers will be good. I question Burden, but if Roma Dunze is out again, Burden is a good enough play. I don't think I'd start him over Godwin, though. Evans is playing, so it could affect Godwin. It absolutely could affect Godwin.
I think it will help Godwin. I think Godwin's the biggest beneficiary of that.
But, yeah, exactly. When you look at this in the grand scope of things here is that if Baker Mayfield is hampered, there's a picture that you can paint that there is going to be more short yardage throws that could eventually benefit Godwin a little bit more. Let's just go to last week, Joe, just before we end this Godwin conversation here. If we go to last week, even in a game where Baker Mayfield only threw for 122 yards, he had 8 targets. That's not dissimilar to Igbuka as well. So I think that if they're allowing 22 targets to wide receivers, I think it's very plausible that all 3 of those players get 8 targets. What they do with them,
it's totally possible.
What they do with them is up to them. Better tight end play this week, Joe, Ferguson or Waller?
I'm going to go with Ferguson, and primarily it's going to be because of the Pickens pouting effect. I can see them forcing the ball to Pickens between the 20s and then giving the touchdowns to everybody else. That is one of the things that historically has happened to him. He is in full-fledged meltdown mode in the big Dallas, and that's what I think is going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think Ferguson gets under six receptions. I do think Waller can get under 6 receptions. The only benefit, like I described earlier to you about Waller, is that there is a good amount of touchdown upside potentially against the Steelers this week. The Steelers don't play tight end well. So if you're going for the volume, it's going to be Ferguson. So if you're banking on volume being the thing that's going to pay you out this week, go Ferguson. If you're banking on the touchdown, I think that Waller probably gets into the end zone this week. So that's how I feel about those 2 players. Purdy or Dart, Joe, in a 4-point touchdown per
throwing league. That New York lineup, man, it's pretty easy here in the playoffs, relative to most teams. That being said, you're not taking the rookie who can get concussed at any second when the other guy's playing against Tennessee. So you go with
I am, and here's why. You saw J.J. McCarthy throw for 3 touchdown passes last week.
Yeah.
Jackson Dart is in by leaps and bounds. And he
also did get knocked out in the first quarter. And this is the same thing I can't risk my quarterback playing like Scattaboo and getting knocked out in the first quarter because he's been in the blue tent every game.
I understand
he doesn't want to change.
There is inherent risk to Jackson Dart, Frosty.
But there's not with Purdy.
And Joe's absolutely right. There is inherent risk with Jackson Dart, but I think he is the home run this week against a defense.
As I said on Monday, in 2 quarterback leagues, in super flexes, I'm playing Dart. But in a 1 quarterback league, I can't take that risk.
I'm shooting for the moon because it's the playoffs. If you don't take the risk and you have the opportunity to, I think that projectively speaking,
Purdy puts up 22 and Dart puts up 4, you lose.
Yeah, you do. You do.
But if Purdy puts up 22 and Dart puts up 28, I don't know if that.
What I said earlier about Purdy has a very safe floor of around 50 points.
Purdy has an incredibly safe floor.
Okay, shooting for the moon with Dart, you might get burned. Your wings might get clipped. It happens. Need 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 2 flexes. Derrick Henry, Vidal, Hunt, Singletary, Hubbard, Myers, BTJ, T. Higgins, Jaden Higgins, Booty. You cannot sit Jacoby Myers. I've talked about this.
He's done everything that BTJ should have did.
I've talked about this, and Joe mentioned that it does take wide receivers a little bit to heat up. But since being in Jacksonville, they have used Jacoby Myers. And we talked about this when we were saying, well, what wide receivers do we want to go after? And we mentioned a couple weeks back that Jacoby was purely on the table, right? Mm-hmm. Now, you look at it and you say, well, like, on the whole, is the matchup good for a guy like Myers? On the whole, for the whole Jacksonville offense, it's not like an exceptional matchup. They are 24th against wide receivers, but also they're not giving up a lot to wide receivers because they don't often have to. The games are often like out of control fairly early, right? And so while the yardage total is like bottom half of the league and what they're giving up, I do think Jacoby Myers, with the targets that he's earned, is going to be an exceptional play this week. He's most likely not going to go under 4 targets. He has the chance to get 8 targets. And in this offense, I think that's going to be good enough. So my first wide receiver that I'm starting is Jacoby Myers. If T. Higgins were to play, I'm absolutely going to start T. Higgins. I just don't think he does play. So that's kind of the problem that you have to sort out.
I don't have a problem with Higgins in Houston, though.
The other thing is I'm most likely not starting Kayshon Boutte. Kayshon Boutte's not getting enough targets on a weekly basis, but he is a home run kind of guy. So it's kind of playing with fire there. So for me, it'd be Myers and T. Higgins if T. Higgins starts. Now, Joe, you mentioned Jaden Higgins.
So, yeah, because I'm assuming T's not playing, so I'm going with Myers and Higgins from Houston would be my 2 receivers. And then I'm going with the 4 backs.
Yeah, and I don't
think give you a good blend of ceiling and floor. And that's what I kind of going for here.
Yeah, I don't think that Higgins is a bad play at all this week against Arizona. I think that there's room to grow. I think he gets at least 4 targets in this game.
He can blow it up. I think that's light. I think 4 targets is light. I think he's going to 4 catches.
Now, in terms of the running backs, so for me, it's BTJ and T. Higgins at the wide receiver position.
It's Myers and Higgins
listen,
is who you're going
with.
with.
Oh, yeah, not BTJ. It's Myers and T. Higgins at the wide receiver position. If T isn't playing, then you slot in Jaden Higgins. We're done with wide receivers. Then you got to pick four running backs.
4 running backs.
Derrick Henry, yes. You're starting Derrick Henry. You're not benching Derrick Henry in this matchup.
I mean, there's only 5 backs. We can cut to the chase. Hunt's the one I'm not playing. I'm playing Herbert, Vidal, and Singletary.
And I would probably disagree with you. I think.
Who are you playing Hunt over?
See, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about Chuba this week, Joe.
I can see the downside in Chuba. I don't see the upside in Hunt to put him in a roster.
Well,
that Kansas City team is going through Mahomes and only through Mahomes. That's what they're doing, and they're not going to run the ball at all.
Okay.
Next week, if they lose this week, next week's a different conversation. But that's what's happening. This is the Mahomes show. Give him God to carry you into the playoffs. That's what they're going to do.
And insofar as that is true,
he doesn't get the ball.
So here's the other thing. If you want to start Chuba, you can't start Vidal.
Why?
Because I want a player that's going to have the majority of the volume on your team. And with Omarion Hampton back, getting back a second game, I cannot trust the volume of both Vidal and Hubbard to take.
I would consider this mutually exclusive, but I'm okay with taking the risk on both of them.
Right.
Because it's basically coming down to, would you rather play Vidal, Hunt, or Booty? And I'm picking Vidal.
I'm saying, I like Singletary this week too.
Well, Singletary's already starting. He's one of the there's 5 backs there. You're starting 4 of them.
Right. I'm on Derrick Henry, Singletary, Hunt, and then picking one of Vidal and Hubbard.
See, I'm not in a Hunt. This fundamentally just comes down to, I don't like Hunt and you do.
That's fair. You cannot be into Kareem Hunt. That's absolutely fair of you to assume that. But he falls into the end zone, man. Like, he
does, but when the season's on the line, Kelsey's getting the ball in the end zone. You're going to see crap, stupid Kelsey touchdowns so he can retire with Taylor up in the booth.
Fair enough. But I do think that Derrick Henry,
I have no faith in the Kansas City running game.
Hubbard has a better matchup. Hubbard has a better matchup than Vidal. So take that.
No, I'm not finding that part either.
What's up, Jesse? Quincy here. This is tough this week, man.
I need to know the injury report. If Lamar practices every day, today, tomorrow, and Friday, I'd go with Lamar. If not, I'm going Purdy. It's that safe. Lamar's hamstring is hindering him. If he takes any time off, it's Purdy. Don't think about it anymore. This is an injury-based question.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I think that, again.
Well, you guys are firing in the questions like crazy. We're up to 71 over the course of this episode being started. We do got to
here. PPR. Josh, start one wide receiver, 1 running back, 1 flex. McLaurin, J-Mo, Marks, Neal, Dowdle, assuming no Kamara and Chubb. It's J-Mo. You're playing with fire when you're playing J-Mo. That's absolutely 100% true. But over the last
I know J-Mo with a mob being a little injured has been fire.
What I wanted to say is with the Rams historically over the season have been good against wide receivers. However, over the last 6 games, they haven't been as good. They've fallen off a little bit. And that's why I'm saying that Jamo is a better play here than McLaurin. So he's the guy that I want. Now, when it comes to these running backs, I am starting 2 of these running backs because I'm not starting McLaurin. I can't trust Mariota with McLaurin.
And that's right.
And so when I look at this, I look at Marks, Neal, or Dowdle. I think you have to start Woody Marks.
You have to. Yeah, that correct.
The volume there is going to be exceptional. And as we said last week, the Arizona Cardinals are not exceptional against running backs.
Well, Arizona's already quit.
They're offering around 24 rush attempts. They do pass the ball a lot, but 132 rushing yards on average per game over the last 4 games to running backs. And the net is even better. So
it's going to be a garbage time situation, and Marks is going to pound.
You have to be Woody.
Marks is the easiest one on this list.
And by that means as well, I think you have to roll into Devin Neal. Devin Neal Devin Neal looks better than what Kamara looked like almost all season.
He did.
Now, I know what I said a couple of weeks ago that I didn't really want Devin Neal on my team. and I didn't. But he has been doing enough with what he's been given to perform well. However, if he doesn't get the touchdown, you're still only looking at about 10 points. So in a matchup that's proving to be probably a good matchup for him with around 25 rush attempts in this game and 125 yards, I think you put him a little bit higher on your list than Dowdle. Dowdle can always pop off, though, guys. But with Dowdle,
I think Neal could too. I like Neal's game.
With Dowdle not seeing the field on third downs, I think you got to roll Marks and Neal. So it's going to be Jamo, Marks, and Neal for me. If you don't want Neal and you want to flip a coin and put in Dowdle, that's fine too.
And by the way, guys, I know you guys keep fluttering in and out. We are doing a simulcast, so you might be seeing questions come up that aren't in your normal feed right now. It's because half of you are watching this vertically, half of you are watching horizontally. Have fun doing it either way you want. Either way, make sure you click like and subscribe with Local Football Flavor.
Yeah, and we answer all questions here at Local Football Flavor. So if you don't hear your question answered, feel free to continue to watch or catch us on a replay as well. I think when we look at this question here about Fannin, I still think Fannin is the better play this week.
I think you're right.
And I'm gonna leave it at that.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
He's a better play. He gets the receptions, he gets the targets. Strange is, like I said last week, Strange is kind of a wild card.
I just love when they announce he's looking for Strange in the end zone. It just makes me happy.
Fannin was a better play last week, even though, Strange was projectably the better.
Well, here's the other part. If Njoku's still banged up, Fannin's a home run because that Cleveland game goes through their tight ends.
Rico, Watson, or Pittman. For the fact that I don't know who is even throwing the ball to anybody.
Oh, man, that's a disaster. On Monday when I was here, I was on board with Riley until he's coming out injured and they say he can't play. You can't. There is no way an 80-year-old Phillip Rivers off the couch is going to be successful.
Maybe one of his kids, but not an 80-year-old Phillip Rivers.
I'm on his kids old enough to be drafted.
I'm on Watson because I can see projectable touchdown upside with Watson on a week-to-week basis. I can't see that with Pittman.
Sit Pittman. I mean, that's the answer.
I can't see that with Pittman. So sit one, you're sitting Pittman. Is CD playing or Garrett Wilson? I haven't heard anything to say that either of these players are playing this week.
CD is obviously closer because it's concussion protocol. You really won't get a clear answer on that until for concussion protocol to get passed, he has to go through a day of practice, which would have been today's. If Dallas's practice report hasn't been released, you won't know that yet.
Is Pitts a good play this week? Yeah. With London being out again, and Tampa offering around 7 targets to tight ends. And when you look at Kyle Pitts over the last 3 weeks, 4 targets, 8 targets, 9 targets. I think projectably that Kyle Pitts is one of the better plays on the slate this week in terms of tight ends. So yes, I am playing Kyle Pitts. Michael, we'll get to that deep dive in a moment after we clear through more of these quick hitters. Wide receiver options from Titans question earlier are Slayton, Iomanor, DJ Moore, Malik Washington, and Adonai. So with Tyrod Taylor going down, and I'm not entirely sure if Tyrod's going to be playing this week as well, Adonai cannot be trusted.
No, you can't trust any of that. Back to the standard.
Fields is also not practicing. So it's a very interesting question where Brady Cook might see the field for the Jets this week. So
this is all about having to cut someone for Vidal. I'm not cutting Vidal for any of those guys.
If I were to cut Vidal for one of these wide receivers, it would probably be Slayton. I know
that doesn't move the needle at all. I'd rather have Vidal.
I know it's weird to say, yeah. If those are the only options, I would probably still stick with Vidal, Titan. Slayton and DJ Moore are interesting, but not enough. Is Hubbard a good start if Rico is out?
Great start if Rico is out.
If Rico is out, he's the guy you do want to start.
Yeah.
Devin Neal was limited today with an abdomen. We'll see how that injury pans out over the course of the week. But yeah, Hubbard is a great start. Probably one of the top 8 start on the week if he is playing and Rico is not. But I haven't heard if Rico isn't playing. Quick hit, PPR, start 1 wide receiver, 1 flex. Igbuka, Watson, BTJ, Marks, Hampton, Monangai, Corum, leaning Igbuka Thursday Night Football for a wide receiver spot, since also starting Lamb. If Lamb is out, then Christian Watson goes in. This is the smart way to approach it. Putting Igbuka into your wide receiver spot is fine. He has been on a downhill slides ever since the Baker injury as well. There is a very strong likelihood that he does get 6 targets in this game, but he hasn't found the end zone in a long time. So honestly speaking, I see a floor for Egbuka somewhere around 7 points with a ceiling somewhere around 14 points. I think Christian Watson has a higher ceiling than that,
but a much lower floor.
And a low floor. And when it comes to BTJ, again,
he's just so unreliable.
I think BTJ is unreliable, but I do think that he has a higher floor than Egbuka. So that's kind of like where I'm at on the wide receiver.
Such a limited ceiling.
There. I'm still
for the flex. There's no way I'm not playing Marks out of that group.
Yeah. So
there's so much garbage time for him to run and run and run, and that's all they're going to do.
Yeah. The only problem for me is this, Josh, is that if Lamb doesn't play, and then you put Christian Watson in there as well, and you take like that 7 points from Egbuka,
Yeah, but regardless, he has 3 receivers.
Is good.
If Lamb is out, he has to play 2 out of 3, and Egbuka, Watson, and BTJ. You're not playing BTJ regardless. So
now, when it comes to the running backs there, Marks, Hampton, Monangai, and Corum, again, Marks is a great play this week. He's one of the better statistical plays on the slate based upon the matchup. Now, Kyle Monangai, as the similar thing that I said about Swift, you can apply the same logic to Monangai as well. And then when you go down the list, Hampton, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think the play is still Woody Marks. You're going to be very comfortable if Corum were to get like 2 touchdowns again, like he got last week with over 100 yards. But that isn't necessarily projectable this week for Blake Corum. So when I look at it and I say, I'm probably on Woody Marks because of the matchup and the volume should be good. If you wanted to pivot, I think I'd pivot into Monangai. Dealer's choice, though. Joe, I have to pick on you about Shedeur. I told you Shedeur would be good. You said you will revisit me on this issue that he's not that good. Joe.
I stand by that he's not that good. I also stand by what I said earlier in the year, is that I do believe that it's a very good coach in Cleveland. He just is in a horrible franchise. And he's a very good offensive mind. His entire career is basically on making Shedeur Sanders look good. I mean, that is exactly, if he wants to hold one of the 32 NFL jobs, Shedeur has to look good. That's his entire job description for the rest of the year. That's why he announced Shedeur is starting every game from here on in. That's who the owner wanted.
He had to.
That does not make Shedeur talented. That makes Shedeur pampered and protected, just like Caleb Williams. So at the end of the day, he doesn't have a strong enough arm. That was your fluke in the wind, and he'll have great Septembers, but he will fall apart when it matters the most. And when he comes to Pittsburgh, when Pittsburgh goes there, they will destroy him.
Okay.
You can't stop anyone on defense.
That is too much Shedeur talk, Joe, even for you.
Oh, no, you don't get to do that for 20 minutes an episode of kickers.
I currently have Jenty Hampton, Nico, Tet, and Neil. My buddy wants me to swap Neil for Fannin, and I think I want to actually, since I was already considered that Fannin versus Bears is a juicy matchup. Honestly, it is dealer's choice here, Michael. Both of these players, I think when you project them out this week, they're going to have good games. Neil is dealing with that abdomen injury, and you can't, and if you want to shy away from that, that's fine. He has a ceiling somewhere around 18 points. When you look at Fannon's ceiling is somewhere also, in that same conversation of like 18.
And also, Fannon's your best chance for Shedeur looking sexy. So if you can go all in on two questions in a row here, man.
No, that was Quincy's question was about Shedeur, Joe.
Oh, my bad.
Come on. Michael's a Giants guy, not a Shedeur guy.
I do. I'm sorry. Yeah, you're the one who called Scotty by his first name, and I didn't realize he actually had a first name.
So when I look at it and I see like ceilings like that, now the thing that you want to look at in this matchup specifically, Michael, is that if you think Devin Neal is going to get a touchdown, I think you play Devin Neal. But it is more likely that Harold
Fannin gets a touchdown.
It's more likely that Fannin gets the touchdown.
Yeah.
So projectable volume goes to Neal. Fannin, I think, has the more projectable touchdown. So play that how you'd like to play it. I do like Fannin a little bit here. I'd watch that injury to Neal.
But if this week is in the vacuum, it's Fannin. But if it's for the duration of the 3 playoff weeks, I would go with Neal, though, because the New Orleans playoff run is decent.
So, Titan, you'd be playing against Evans, Judkins, and Harvey against Green Bay. Feeling good. Yeah. I mean, Harvey against Green Bay is nothing special. Like I said, I do have reservations about Judkins, and it's Evans' first game back. Evans is a touchdown whore, though. So he could have.
Yeah, but the first game back for receiver is always scary.
He could have 2 receptions, 20 yards, 2 touchdowns.
Good. He probably is more likely to have that than 2 touchdowns.
Shane, Broncos or Saints defense for week 15. So looking at the slate here, Broncos or Saints this week, Joe. I think you can roll into the Broncos a little bit this week. Yeah. Just understand that it's more likely that Green Bay scores points. More likely that they score points. The Saints defense is an interesting play, but Carolina is an interesting team as well. They can be a terrible team one week.
Yeah, the benefit you get with the Saints defense is the game's going to be shorter, so there's less chances for your defense to mess up. And that's something to really consider. But the Denver defense is much more talented. I do think overall, I probably lean this. Personally speaking, I lean the Saints because I like rooting against certain people, and Bryce Young is a really easy person for me to do that with. And I like seeing the Saints be good. It's a weird thing. I like New Orleans is good, and I'm personally rooting for them.
When you go back to a couple of weeks ago, what you're talking about happened. Bryce Young played like shit, right? And you just had to contend. You just had to.
And the rookie's starting to look good, just like I projected this whole time.
So you just had to worry about the
shook it up.
He shook it up with his legs, that's for sure.
Yeah,
quarterback streamer this week? McCarthy, Brissett, Shook, or Shador? Shane, you will never see me starting JJ McCarthy. I don't care how many touchdowns he threw for last week. You will never see me starting McCarthy. Now, Brissett, Shook, or Shador. You'll never see Joe starting Shador.
You won't.
There's a reasonable argument that you can make that Shador is an interesting enough play this week.
My answer for that streamer is Shook.
Shook is interesting enough. The last time they played, he went for 2 touchdowns and 282 yards. He does have rushing upside, so I think you can roll yourself into Shook very comfortably. With not a lot of reservations. And the reason you have reservations about Jacoby Brissett is because he's facing off against Houston, and Houston hasn't allowed a passing touchdown in what feels like forever. So
pretty much. And they also only scores touchdowns in the fourth quarter.
Shook would be the answer to that question if you look at it from that perspective. Who to flex? McLaurin, you're out of here. Sutton, Aaron Jones, Blake Corum, It's do or die time. Good luck, everybody. I think everything that I said about Minnesota is still true. They did have more rush attempts, but I did say that, it's very unlikely that Jordan Mason eclipses 10 rushing attempts. When we go back to last week here, let me pull it up here again. I seem to have lost it for some reason. When we look at Jordan Mason last week, he had 11 carries. So, it's not crazy. When you look at Aaron Jones, the reason we look there is just to see how many total attempts. He had 14. So he had a good amount of rushing yards. But still, this is a weirdly distributed kind of situation for them. But also at the same point in time that the Dallas defense has got better against the run with Quinn and
They did. They put a real run stopper in the middle of it.
It's very hard to trust that. It's also very hard to trust Blake Corum in a matchup that is one of the worst ones on the slate.
Yeah, I think you have to go with Sutton just because he has the least amount of red flags around him.
So
it hurts, but it's true.
Yeah. So, it's not that I really like Sutton this week by any stretch of the imagination. But Joe's right. It's one of those plays that it's ugly. Yes,
but they're all ugly.
It is
the least ugly,
but they're all kind of equally as sucky. But at least over the last 2 weeks, Sutton has gotten back on his target game. So I like that. So
we're about to approach 90 questions since we kicked off, Bob. There's no way we're closest. How far behind are we since the first since this question was asked?
About 40 minutes.
Holy hell, Bob, we got to catch it. We're 40 minutes behind.
30 is a great start. I'm going to go quick on this one, CC. It's fan, and for every reason that I've said about, we don't even know who's throwing the ball there. Broncos or the Saints this week, Shane? We got through on that question. It's Broncos for me. It's Saints for Joe, but I can make a reasonable argument for the Saints as well. This question was Shook. This question was Sutton, although I do kind of am interested in Aaron Jones. When it comes to this question, I'm on Isaiah Likely this week.
Me too. Likely over Waller is the question.
I like the volume that Isaiah Likely could get in a matchup against Cincinnati. Again, they could blow him out of the water.
That's what you started the show with. Tight ends against Cincinnati is the play.
Jesse, which quarterback would you start this week between Young, Lawrence, and Darnold? So again, we don't know what weather's going to be like over the next few days for any of these games. So it could really that could really kind of affect people's decisions. I think that Sam Darnold still is an exceptional play this week.
I would go with Darnold as well.
One of the reasons why I think that is that, again, when we look at Sam Darnold overall, if the numbers favor Sam Darnold in a like from a passing perspective, I'm looking at the yardage. Because in order for Sam Darnold to be productive as a fantasy player in a week, he needs to accumulate a lot of yardage. Indianapolis over the last 4 games is offering around 263 yards to quarterbacks. And while I don't think that it's going to be as back and forthy as it should be in this game, because we don't know what the quarterbacks will hold, I still do think that Sam Darnold is a great play this week. I think that Trevor Lawrence is interesting enough, but also I'm not super confident in that, and I'm not super confident in Bryce Young. So it's got to be Darnold from that perspective. I'm starting Purdy over Mahomes. Don't change my mind. I'm not going to. I think that Brock Purdy over Mahomes this week is a good play. I think that you can project both of them at 2 touchdowns. And who do you think gets that extra touchdown? Joe will tell you Patrick Mahomes.
Just remember, he's going to try to put on the Superman hat. I'm also on Team Purdy, by the way. Just saying, Kansas City is going to do everything with Mahomes to try to get what last hope they have. Yeah.
Ace here. Start one of Cora, Monangai, Reed, or Higgins. I'm on Monangai or Higgins. I favor Monangai. I favor Monangai a little bit more than Higgins this week. And I understand everybody. Like, I get it. You heard me say last week that Corum was a start. Like, you heard me say that came out of my mouth. Like, I want to start Corum last week. But this week, I really don't want to start Corum. The reason why I don't want to start Corum is not really because of the opportunities, because Detroit has given up around 26 opportunities per game over the last 4 weeks, and that is a very good clip for this team in general. But it is where the touchdowns are at, right? They're not giving up a lot of touchdowns to running backs. And where Corum really made that money last week was those 2 touchdowns. And so if I can't project a touchdown for Blake Corum this week, I'm really not about that. And I tell you over the last 4 games, but in totality, this is how crazy this is. In totality, over the last 4 games, they've offered 1 rushing touchdown. Okay. And over the last 10 weeks, they have offered a total of 3 rushing touchdowns the Detroit Lions have. So I don't think you can be on Corum knowing those statistics and hoping for the best. And that's why Monangai and Higgins kind of take it for me. And I lean a little bit more toward Monangai than Higgins.
I do as well.
Hubbard or Pitts in the flex this week? Frosty, this is a nice, interesting question.
See, you've been dancing around asking us Pitts this whole day, Frosty. It makes me think that you don't want to play Pitts. But I would go with Pitts unless Rico is out.
Well, you don't really have that luxury of knowing that because, unfortunately, you got to play Pitts on Thursday night.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
So here's the reason why I Frosty, Pitts in the flex, I think it's a good enough flex, but usually I don't start tight ends in the flex unless it's like a super exceptional matchup.
That's true, too.
We're getting news that Dowdle is still going to be the early down running back. Hubbard is still going to get third down work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think Pitts, at the end of the day, is probably going to get slightly more upside this week. So I'm on Pitts, but Hubbard is good enough. With Tune suffering fumbleitis, is Etienne now the bell cow in Jacksonville?
He always was.
I would be happy to start ETN this week. Like I said before, I think ETN is a great play this week. Everything that I said about ETN earlier in the year, I still think that. But I also believe that he is one of the better plays this week in Week 15. Start one.
Give me the Patriots defense over the Bears defense for two reasons: the week off to prepare and the week off to prepare.
Yeah, I mean, Josh Allen is still Josh Allen. And the Patriots defense has played more terribly over the last couple of
weeks. Has there been one single team they've watched more film of? And they already beat them.
Yeah, I mean, both I think are very similar to that regard. Yeah, Patriots is interesting, but I'm not going to say no to Chicago. I called Smitty. He says starting Buka regardless. I just can't do it right now, man. I believe in the talent, but I just think he hit a rookie wall and is slumping majorly. He is.
The Baker injury can't be discounted, but I agree with where you're at there, Mike, because the reality is that with them bringing both of the other two back, it makes it so much easier to just hide in Buka as he's crashing the rookie wall. Now, for this one, Josh, I cannot play any Colts.
It's still Fannin. It's still
Fannin. It's still Fannin.
So Michael, I think this is horse shit. I think that if your league still does a consolation bracket, it's less horseshit because people still want to win the consolation bracket. However, if your team does not offer a consolation bracket in that capacity, the waiver move should be strictly given to
people alive in the real bracket, period. I don't care if you do a consolation bracket or not. It should only be for people alive in the real bracket. That's the law. That's how it should be. If it's not, you're doing it wrong. Spike should not be allowed to dictate your championship.
I would absolutely get the commish to go in on that. Seriously, I would. I would look into that. Who would you rather have for the rest of the season? It's Christian Watson. It's Christian Watson. He has more touchdown upside than Higgins. And they're getting the same amount of value.
Dude, I'm telling you, that Houston playoff slate is so garbage. It's going to be. They're going to score so many points.
And guys, you'll see that we're not answering these deep dives just quite yet. We're deep diving a lot of questions, but we'll hit these deep dives in earnest in a little bit. Drop Jaden Reed, Garrett Wilson, or Burden for Hubbard. I'm dropping Jaden Reed. There is minimal.
And I drop Burden.
There's minimal to zero interest that I have in Jaden Reed right now. You know that Jaden Reed is one of the players that I loved last year. Mm-hmm. Going into this season, I was very much soured on him for many reasons. Now, when I look at it and I see last week he got 4 targets for 31 yards, 2 carries for 22 yards. With Christian Watson back, this changes the way that they might use Jaden Reed, but still, I see all these updates that's saying Jaden Reed will see an expanded rule. Jaden Reed will see an expanded rule. Well, you know what? That's horseshit because we know that he won't because it will be game dependent and there is opportunity.
And that's all true, Bob, but I know that Luther Burden III has a quarterback who can't get him the ball in the wind.
Jordan Love can't throw Jaden Reed the ball because the coach
chooses not to. There's a difference between wanting to and can't.
I think you can comfortably drop Jaden.
Pirates of the Caribbean taught me that when I was 12 years old.
I'm not even going to be mad if he burns me. Like I said, I wouldn't be mad if JJ McCarthy burned me. I wouldn't be mad if Jaden Reed burned me.
Nick, are the Pittsburgh Steelers ready for a playoff run? If you define a playoff run as getting a home field advantage and having Josh Allen walking in here dropping 70 on you, they're so ready for that because that's what's going to happen.
Snow is yellow sometimes. The snow is yellow sometimes. Nick, start 3 running backs this week. Genty, Hubbard, Chase Brown, Jalen Warren. Thanks. Joe, who are your 3? And then I'll give you my 3.
So it's really, the question is bench one of those. And I'm benching Chase Brown. I'm benching Chase Brown for a macro meta theory that I believe in. And that is that the Cincinnati Bengals, number one thing they care about is not winning Super Bowls. It is selling season tickets. And the only way that they can do that is through Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. And he is going to throw the ball 50-plus times a game for the rest of the year so they can sell tickets. So therefore, Chase Brown, who does not catch the ball, is useless, even Chase below Brown, a guy who's not the bell cow in Carolina.
See, Joe, Chase Brown does catch the ball. And I do think, you're wrong about that. But when I look at Chase Brown, I like Chase Brown this week because T. Higgins is concussed and may not play.
I think they might throw the ball 80 times to Jamar.
So that brings those targets then compiling on Gesicki, Jamar, and you have
the iOS, baby.
iOS. I think I'm benching Hubbard. And the reason I'm benching Hubbard is probably, again, Chase Brown is one of those guys that the matchup is tougher. That's absolutely true. The matchup is tougher for Chase Brown. But the thing that I kind of like about that is that while I don't project a lot of yards for Chase Brown, I'm chasing the touchdown with Chase Brown. Okay. I think
it's going to Jamar.
Because if you're chasing touchdowns, Chuba is also a hard touchdown chaser as well. Because
no doubt. I mean, those are clearly the bottom two.
He's only going to get work with when you have third downs, etc. So if they're in comeback mode a lot against New Orleans, then you're going to see a lot of Chuba. But there's a way that you can write that picture that they're not going to be in comeback mode that much against the Saints. So that's why I'm benching Hubbard. So I'm starting Genty, I'm starting Chase Brown, I'm starting Jaylen Warren, and then Hubbard will find the bench for me out of this grouping of players. So I went to our chat and vented in my frustrations. I asked the commissioner's thoughts on the matter and what he felt was a fair solution. I said the only thing that is close to fair is that he must drop them. I think so too. I think he needs to drop them, and I think anybody who has remaining budget left should be, or the next person up should be able to have Corbin. I mean, that's the only fair solution to it.
Or excluding anyone who's not in the winner's bracket.
Excluding anybody who's not playing for the winner's bracket. Exactly. Which defense to start here, Nick? Saints, Patriots, Bears, Bucks. I think I'm on the Bucks. Without London, the pass defense for Atlanta is not, or the pass offense.
Thursday night gets weird, especially with teams that have already quit. You can talk me into the Bucks. I can get that.
I'm on the Bucks over any of those teams. If I were to pivot off the Bucks, to be honest with you, Nick, it'd be the Saints.
Yep, that's right.
Okay, so that's where I'm at. Start Baker or Bryce Young?
Baker.
I still think you start Baker. He got Bucky back, and while he didn't have a huge yardage total, you still see a little bit of a light.
Listen, I would take Baker Mayfield barely able in a walker going out on the field over Bryce Young.
But also, too, both of these teams are fighting for their lives for a playoff spot. They know they have to win these games.
And Tampa Bay is a vastly better team and a vastly better player.
While you're like, oh, Baker's been playing like garbage lately. Yeah, that's absolutely true. But Atlanta has been playing like garbage lately, too. So
yeah, well, the difference is Baker's injured and he's getting healthier. I'm going with Baker.
I hope that Baker can be healthy and give you a good game. He has yet to comment. No one has on the matter yet. Thanks, Titan. I agree. Yeah, this is the thing. Like, once you're out of it, guys, don't put in waiver claims to get anybody else.
Yeah, it's just appropriate etiquette.
Like, it's totally like, that's how I feel about it. Start two between Cook, Judkins, Harvey, and Hampton. Joe, these are your boys.
I'm definitely going with Cook. I think there's at this point no debate about that, especially if there's even a little bit of weather in the Buffalo New England game. So to me, this is very interesting between the three rookies, each of which for their own various reasons. I really liked what I saw out of Omarion out of his first game back, and it's natural to project that will improve in his second game back out of injury. Harvey has definitely stepped up in ways I didn't think he was going to get to this year. And Judkins is the way you protect Shador from looking bad. So I think that volume-wise, Omarion and Judkins are the safer play, with Judkins probably getting the most volume out of the bunch. Mm-hmm. The highest ceiling might be Harvey, but the one I'm going to go on, which I think is the best balance of the two, is Omarion. And I think that's where I would settle when it's all said and done. So I'd go Cook and Hampton.
I'm on Cook. The reason being definitely because of the volume. I mean, he's been getting incredible volume, and I think it's fair to be able to project that he's going to do fairly well with the volume he gets. He has a chance to get 40 yards. He has a chance to get 50 yards, but he always has a chance to get 2 touchdowns and 70 yards. Yep. Now, when you go with Harvey, as I said earlier about Harvey, the matchup isn't like super incredible for RJ Harvey either. There's going to be around 26 rushing attempts in that game, most likely. if you go and you look at Green Bay's average allowed, it's 26. So if you look at what Denver's doing, last week, Harvey was able to accumulate around 17 total carries. Week before that, 13, with around 6 receptions. So that RJ Harvey has the chance to be super relevant on a week-to-week basis with this team just continuing to want to win games. And I think for that reason, and because there is more volume to kind of play with Denver, that I'm on Harvey and I'm on Cook. And I'm benching Judkins and Hampton out of that grouping. It's not because I don't think Judkins is good. You guys know that I love Judkins, but it's just because if the matchup gets away from Shedeur and Cleveland, there is a very high chance.
No, I get you. You're going with a higher ceiling play, and I'm totally cool with that.
I think Harvey has a higher ceiling this week.
Yeah, he does. I'm not fighting that. He has a high ceiling.
Would you drop Goddard for Jawan Johnson or Darren Waller? I'd drop him for Jawan if I wanted to drop him.
Yeah, I'm not sure. The thing with Goddard is that at any moment he can give you 40, but he also can give you nothing. I get how Johnson is a safer play and a more enticing play. So if your roster if you're only losing if Goddard gets you a 0, I'm doing that. But if you feel you can withstand a Goddard 0, I would shoot for the moon and keep him in there.
Yeah, and that's perfectly fair. That's perfectly fair. Hold on, I went back up to Quincy's question. Sorry about that. Gotta go back down, guys. Sorry about that.
Misclicking. We answered that one a while ago.
I'm misclicking.
So on this note, well, Bob's refining it, guys. We are doing a dual broadcast horizontally and vertically. So you might be seeing questions out there that aren't even in your feed. This is why. We're going to answer them all through here. We do need to pick it up, though, as we've already popped across the phone.
No, this question came back again. That's why it was throwing me off. Or this comment from Quincy came back again.
Quincy just wants everyone to know that he's the best, man. But, Quincy, we already answered your questions earlier, probably about 40 minutes ago.
I think it's Purdy, but keep your eye on Lamar. I'm playing Dart this week over Love Mariota versus the Giants, Love versus the Broncos, and the Tigers. I think that's fair, Trone. Joe will tell you there, like I said earlier,
he's too much of a risk for me, and I would personally go with Knicks. But
there's a lot of inherent risks with Dart, but I think that he's the better play. Should he have to drop him and put him back on the waivers, or should Kamish look into who would have been entitled to picking him up off waivers based on my position? And should he put him on my team? So, Michael, I feel 2 ways about that, right? Is that if your Kamish wants to throw him back on the waiver wire and have everybody get a chance at him again before Sunday, fair. But also, if you were the next one up in the waiver wire, or if you were the next one up with your dollars or the waiver wire order, however it was, then it should go to you, legitimately. I mean, like, that's not even
because you would still be the next one up.
It's Fan and Mark. Well, we talked a lot about why, and the main reason why is we do not know who is throwing Warren the ball.
You can't trust that. If they don't know who's playing and it's Wednesday, you're gonna have a bad passing performance.
And Quincy, we touched on this. For me, it's Derrick Henry, Hunt, Singletary, and then you pick and choose between Vidal and Hubbard. Joe is benching Hunt and playing the other 4 running backs. The wide receivers, it would be Myers and Higgins for us. Either of the Higginses, whichever one decides that's playing. So if
T's healthy, but since he's not, it's going to be the one from Houston.
I trust Fannin more than Warren for some now. Yeah, exactly. This is the way. If you look at it and you don't know who's playing quarterback, there's a chance that they might just throw to the tight end anyway.
Or there's a chance they might just give it to JTT forever.
Yeah. Trone, I need 2 wide receivers this week. You're starting Nico, okay? There's no doubt about it. You're starting Nico, I do believe that you're still starting Chris Olave this week. There is a,
and I'd probably go with Devontae over the Steelers running backs.
There is a story that you can paint that Olave might not get as many targets this week, but I do think that he's going to be fine. He's been digged up recently. Now, when you look at I'm not starting McLaurin. I'm not starting Debo. So then this comes down to Devonta, Jalen Warren, Gainwell, or Corum. Joe, how do you project?
I'm probably going Devontae over the Steelers running backs. To give you the ranking of it, it would go Devontae, Gainwell, Warren, Corum. Because they just do not give touchdowns to Warren.
Yeah. And I'm on Devonta Smith for my flex there. So I'm starting 3 wide receivers in PPR. I do think that Warren and Gainwell are interesting plays this week. Like I said, I think Warren is a start for some people this week. But I do
115 questions since we started, Bob. We're getting fired at us today.
I got some concerns. The super duper big gulp. Joe, show it. Show it.
Right, baby.
That thing is full of water. That thing is full of water, and it is only.
And Michael, they did outlaw it. You cannot buy it anymore.
His wife had to buy it on eBay.
Yeah, they don't exist anymore.
They don't even sell it anymore. Start one between Wilson, Jennings, Watson, and Higgins. Well, I'm never going to say no to Michael Wilson, and a lot of
as long as Harrison's out, the answer is Wilson. Like,
a lot of
he has shown amazingly. It makes me actually wonder what's wrong with Harrison. Like, why couldn't Harrison be doing this?
A lot of people are going to tell you, hey, Bob, Houston, though, man. Houston's good. Yeah, Houston's defense is absolutely exceptional.
But they forced the ball to Wilson.
There's no doubt about that. But, again, Jacoby Brissett is passing at one of the highest clips in the league right now. And even in a bad matchup last week, he projected not as good, but he was the play.
He dominated, put up 30 plus.
There's no reason there's no reason to say that you want to bench
the reason is if Harrison is starting, you would consider that. But
no,
even then I might still go with Wilson.
No, even then I wouldn't consider it because listen, Rashee Rice didn't have a great game, but he did have 8 targets. Okay. 8 targets, 4 receptions, 8 targets. And I get all the talk about Houston is warranted, guys. I understand that. If I were to pivot off of Wilson, it would be into Watson. Okay. Juwan Jennings is an interesting play to me this week as well. But
yeah, Jennings, I would actually go in the order you have it written, Jesse.
But again, I don't really have reservations about Michael Wilson, despite the bad matchup. I do think that you're going to be a little bit more surprised than anything else, that this matchup actually is going to be pretty good. And I think it gets even better if we consider that if Marvin Harrison plays, I think it's going to be better for Michael Wilson. So I actually do want Marvin Harrison to play because Michael Wilson will get the better matchup. But yeah, I think that it's fair. I put Wilson, then Watson, then Jennings. But I think it would be fair enough if you wanted to start Watson or Jennings. But I'm just not I am not unriding the hot hand here.
And that's the answer.
Wilson is the hot hand. And if I lose, knowing that, hey, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to be just fine because I know that Michael Wilson is a good play. I played T-Law over Mahomes last week in round 1 because of the Texans.
I would switch back to Mahomes.
Yeah, I'm switching back to Mahomes this week over Trevor Lawrence. So if I had started Trevor Lawrence last week, I'm picking up and I'm playing Patrick Mahomes this week. The differential, I think, in their floors is probably going to be about 2 to 3 points. But the ceiling, I think, could possibly be very high for Patrick Mahomes this week and not as high for Trevor Lawrence. So I'm on Patrick Mahomes as well. If I do get Corum, which is better, he's not replacing anyone in my starting lineup. Michael, I'm not starting Blake Corum this week. No. But I will be when he plays the Raiders. So, yeah.
Yes, you will be. But not this week.
On brand, our man, Breece Hall or Chris Rodriguez. Chris Rodriguez has the better matchup. It's a fact, but he's on a worse team. I explained this to you guys last week. Chris Rodriguez had a great matchup last week. He had 53 yards.
I think he's still going to go with Breece, though.
So, again, the matchup is great for Chris Rodriguez, but the offense is terrible. So,
the Jets will have a quarterback this week, so which means it's even going to go even more to Breece.
But again, the Giants are not very good on defense either. So, when you take that all into consideration, is Chris Rodriguez a bad play this week? No, not at all. Breece Hall has one of the worst matchups on the slate. Not a lot of rushing attempts that Jacksonville has given up on average over the last 4 games. They have not given up a lot of.
Yeah, but he's going to be their whole offense. They're not going to they're going to throw it with a 4th-string quarterback.
I get it. But here's the thing, Joe. Even though the defensive line is shit for Jacksonville, if you stack the box against Brady Cook and Breece Hall has to block, Breece Hall's not going to have a good game. So I get everything that you're saying, but there is so much working against Breece Hall in this game, assuming that Brady Cook doesn't play.
While walking against Rodriguez, too.
So,
these are two C to D level options. Let's just be real.
I think Chris Rodriguez is the play this week, Caps. It's weird. Judkins or Tracy, full practice participation. If Tracy's a full practice participation, the matchup says that Tracy is going to have the better matchup.
And I'm sticking with Judkins for them protecting Shedeur. And
that's fine. I do think, again, when we look at Tyrone Tracy, right, is that if he's getting over 14 carries and 4 receptions, he's absolutely going to be a smash start this week. That's why I'm saying Devin Singletary as well, because there's going to be around 27 opportunities in this game for them to take advantage of against running back rushers. So even if you split that evenly, that's 14 and 14. Tracy can do a decent chunk of damage with 14 carries. Judkins can also do a decent chunk of damage with 14 carries. But the thing that I like about Tracy over Judkins is that you might get a little bit of reception upside with Tyrone Tracy. So if he's a full practice participant and you can slate that he is going to play a full complement of snaps, which I think or get a full complement of opportunities, which is probably going to be around 17. I think it evens itself out. I take Tracy in the better matchup, but Joe's absolutely right about Quinshon Judkins. I'm starting Judkins over Rodriguez.
Yeah, that one's even easier.
Again, Rodriguez has the better matchup on the slate, but it's an untrustworthy matchup.
Completely untrustworthy.
It's very questionable here. Love or Stroud this week, Joe?
I'm going with Stroud. Arizona doesn't stop anybody.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Stroud as well. Again, Stroud doesn't project for anything probably higher than 2 touchdowns. If you get those extra bonus touchdowns for Stroud, you're going to get a Baltimore game. You're going to get a San Francisco game, which is nice. Oddly, on that, Joe would be on Stroud. I would be on Dart.
That's right.
For everything that I said earlier. Don't worry about it, Michael. That's what we're here for.
No, you got to let it now.
AJ, what's happening? CC, we'll get into these deep dives in definitely in a minute. I like horizontal over the verticals, but I'm too committed to the vertical chat at this point today. I feel that.
All good.
William, where do we stand on this one? Rico, Debo, Evans, or Jalen Warren? Sit one. I'm sitting
Debo.
I'm probably sitting Debo.
Yeah.
Debo had a nice connection with Mariota, but I can't trust it right now.
Nope.
So I'd be playing Rice, Evans, and Jalen Warren. However, if you don't believe that Evans is going to get more than 5 targets, then you start Debo.
I would still roll the dice on the Evans return over Debo. Right. Debo's done.
So I remember this, Quincy. I remember the conversation that we had here. Now, I think that he's playing better than he needs to, right? That he doesn't need to. We got you, Michael. We will check that deep dive in a moment. We will. I just want to get up to date on the quick hitters before we get to the deep dives.
Yeah, Bob, how many more quick hitters do we have?
I don't know. I'm checking through the chat right now. I'm definitely dropping Jaden Reed, Frosty. Jacoby Brissett is definitely boomer bust at times. He is, but the opportunities
not busted against Houston
are going to be there. You know, I think that Jacoby Brissett is not the player that I want to play this week, but I'm still comfortable playing Michael Wilson. CeeDee Lamb and Drake London, unfortunately, London already was ruled out, so I have to play Igbuka, but I could grab Godwin and play him over Igbuka. If CeeDee is out, I only have DK to play. It's looking rough.
Dude, DK's been like a crazy guy this year. He's had some decent.
His opportunities are weird and less evenly distributed than you would want. I would hope that CeeDee plays this week for you, but I probably wouldn't add Godwin over Igbuka. I think that both projectably have the same floor and ceiling. So yeah, I think I just roll with what I have, and I wouldn't play 2 of the Tampa wide receivers, although you could, but you want to have the opportunity to play CeeDee Lamb. So if the opportunity presents itself, you have Henderson, Chase Brown, and Dowdle and Judkins, and I can play 3. I'm thinking about sitting Judkins, but he is the projected to be the most out of all of them, and I don't know why. So if I could play 3 of these,
the reason is that they're just going to make that game take 10 minutes, as both of them are just running the ball like crazy. That's the reason why. It's volume. I personally would bench Chase Brown out of those 4, maybe Rico. But
Joe, that's
still one of my 2 starts out of Henderson and Judkins.
I think it's still Chase Brown and Henderson for me. Then I think Dowdle and Judkins is the coin flip for me. Dowdle can be very explosive, and if he breaks off a great run, his stat line is going to be incredible. Judkins, on the other hand, can be incredible, but the opportunities haven't the opportunities haven't necessarily presented himself. And I think that all things considered, that I would rather I'd rather tip my hat into the Carolina offense against the Saints than Cleveland right now.
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
So I'd be on Chase Brown, Henderson, and Dowdle, and not Judkins, even though you guys know I love Judkins. Michael, love it. So we got to that one from Nick already. I'm seeing just a couple of things that pop up here. We're on Baker this week over Bryce Young. On right. By waiting week 16. I have Houston's defense. I dropped Strange and Cleveland's defense for Waller and Juwan. Would you drop one of these tight ends for Mike Gesicki?
No.
Yeah, I think that you could if you wanted to drop Waller for Gesicki this week. That Gesicki is good this week. I don't see a reason why you necessarily need to, but I gave you all the reasons at the top of the show. You guys can go back and look at that about Mike Gesicki, that considering T. Higgins it potentially would be out, Mike Gesicki's volume goes up in a matchup that proves that it's probably going to be a back and forthy. That's one of my favorite ways to say it. I do think –
love the technical terms.
I do think that dropping Waller for Gesicki for a volume play is not going to be a bad idea. But again, I wouldn't want Waller to burn me if he goes off and has 2 or 3 touchdowns. So hold on to Waller if you want, if you don't feel like burning him, or drop him on Saturday so nobody can pick him up on Sunday. That's the heads up play. Or drop him Sunday morning so nobody can pick him up on Sunday. Think about it that way. And for me, like we said earlier, I'm on Bucks and then Saints in there. Dirt, start 2 full PPR, Judkins, Fannin, Devonta Smith, Chetas, Igbuka, Kamara, Worthy. Lord Jesus, Dirt.
I mean, you got to start Jettis. There's no part of my soul.
I have said numerous times, Joe, you do not have to start Justin Jefferson.
I can't. I don't accept that. I do not accept this reality.
He has gotten a cumulative, like 24 points over the last 5 weeks total. You do not have to start Justin Jefferson. He does not have to be in your starting lineup.
Guys, we just figured out how to piss Bob off. Start Justin Jefferson.
Devonta Smith is a better play on the slate than Justin Jefferson. Okay? He's a better play on the slate than Justin Jefferson. So Igbuka is a better play on the slate than Justin Jefferson, because at least Igbuka is getting some yardage. Okay? If it were me and I'm relying on Jalen Hurts to come back from a real shitty performance, which he's a dog, so I think he will. I'm on Fannin and Devonta Smith comfortably, right? If you want more of a volume play, then you put Judkins in. But I really don't think that Jettis is worth starting at all this week.
And I'm on Jettis and Devonta.
And here, again, Nick, it's going to be Genty, Warren, and Chase Brown for me. If you wanted to plug in anybody over Jaylen Warren, then you could plug in Hubbard for Jaylen Warren. Hubbard has a better matchup than Jaylen Warren, but I'm just relying on the Steelers to run it just a little bit more with Warren as an early down player rather than Gainwell in that regard. Do I start Bowers or Fannin this week, Nick?
You can't bench Bowers.
If it were me,
you're yelling me for Bowers now too.
Okay, Bowers. I would say, you can't bench Brock Bowers because he's going to be an integral piece of this offense moving.
Yeah, he's their whole offense.
He's the whole offense. while I don't see much touchdown upside with Brock Bowers this week, I could see a reason that Hannon would be a great play. And that's not because he had like 28 points last week. It's just because in general, Shedeur and all of these Cleveland quarterbacks have favored Harold Fannin because he's an extremely good athlete. Both of these players are great athletes. And I think that Brock Bowers is still the better play over Fannin this week. But I wouldn't be mad if I started Fannin and Brock Bowers had a glow-up game, and so did Fannin. Nick, start 2 wide receivers. DK, Pickens, Nico, Pearsall, Judy. It's Nico, and if DK's healthy, it's DK. DK's volume has gotten incredibly good over the last several weeks. It's also very dependent upon how the defenses play Aaron Rodgers. So if they're going to lay up and try to sack him a lot, Aaron Rodgers is not going to have a great game. But DK Metcalf has been better over the past several weeks than he has prior to that. Now, when we look at Miami, though, Miami has played. The Steelers have played wide receivers better over the last several weeks, so that might be a ding against Waddle. But Miami has not been playing wide receivers great over the last several weeks. So if DK Metcalf is going to get volume, and they're not going to pressure Aaron Rodgers, I think that the answer there is DK Metcalf. Now, the alternate answer, if you are uncomfortable rolling into DK Metcalf, then you play George Pickens. The only problem with George Pickens, right, is that, again, if Dallas gets an early lead, and it could be likely that they do, there's not really a super big reason for them to have to pass the ball a lot. And it's the volume game that favors George Pickens the most. So if CD is out, I do kind of not want to play George Pickens a lot with his headspace right now, I guess. But also, I think that DK could be a better play than George Pickens this week. But again, you're going to have to watch the DK injury. I think Pearsall and Judy are not on the menu. You're deciding between those three. Nico and Pickens is fine. I think Nico and DK is fine. You're definitely starting Nico.
So, Bob, unless we're down to like the last 3 quick hits, go into the deep dives now.
All right. So I see. We got some quick hits there. So let's deep dive these from everybody in the chat. So we are going through all the questions. These questions were from KJ, Michael, Jesse, and CC at around 350, 411, 415, 430. We will get to the rest of the quick hits after these deep dives, guys. So the better quarterbacks start this week, Bo or A-Rod. The Bo's matchup scares me and never know what old man Rodgers will show up. Shedeur is also still on the waiver wire if he's the better play. Joe, talk to us about Bo Nix.
So, KJ, well, I'm going to just hit the question overall. The first thing is both of them are better than Shedeur, starting point, especially when you consider the weather of what you're going to get in that Cleveland game. So I'm going to go with Nix as the answer as far as who I'd want to start over Rodgers, predominantly for 2 reasons. The first is that they're just going to the problem that Denver has, and with Bo Nix overall, is they got a restrictor plate on them. And now that we're coming down the home stretch, and they now have gotten the division and they've gotten comfortable, I think that we're going to start opening it up to win in the playoffs. And this is the preview for it. So I see that there's much more projectability in the overall plan that the Broncos are bringing to the table for their on-the-field playoff hunt to start opening him up. And then that's why ultimately I'm going to lean on Bo than Rodgers, who's basically throwing for his life and too arrogant to hand the ball off.
I mean, there's a lot to say about that. There really is. But when we look at it on paper, okay, and we look at it statistically speaking, Rodgers, while the matchup against Miami is not an incredible matchup, one of the things that does favor this over the last 4 games is that Miami has been allowing around 22 pass completions per game, which is the 6th highest on the slate, Thursday to Monday. One of the other things to keep in mind as well is that they're offering around 1 touchdown a game. Now, when we go into the totals here, That's around 89 completions, with pass attempts being around 128, which is like very average, with around 5 passing touchdowns. Okay. Now, Aaron Rodgers is one of those players that has a very low weekly floor, an exceptionally low weekly floor.
He also has been horrible in every game that started after his bedtime.
Now, against Baltimore, it was 284 yards. Monday night in the cold. Now, this is not necessarily a ding against Aaron Rodgers' career, because Aaron Rodgers has played in the cold his entire career.
No, it's a ding against old man Rodgers.
But he is older. It is night against Miami. Now, Miami might not have Devin Achane. They might, though. And I question the motivation for Aaron Rodgers.
I question the total amount of points that will need to be scored over.
I want to harken back to our conversation about Mike Tomlin a couple weeks back, where every game feels like games they should win, they lose. Games that they should lose, they win. But this game is strictly in the middle. Miami's not exceptional. Steelers aren't exceptional.
Nope.
It's kind of in the middle. So to me, I don't really know how Mike Tomlin will prepare the troops for this game, if at all. And with Rodgers, I just don't see a great game, statistically speaking, based off of the projections when we look at it. Because, again, while Miami offers one of the highest completions over the last 4 games, when you take the last 2 games, Miami is still in the top 12. So or top 15, top 12, somewhere.
And also, KJ, from talking about the game of fantasy football, the last thing that you want is going into Monday night needing 28 points out of Aaron Rodgers. Because all you are going to do is learn how to hate Aaron Rodgers the same way that Bob does.
Yeah, seriously. Now going into Bo Nix, I have my concern. While the Packers,
concerns on Bo Nix.
Listen, while the Packers have offered around less than league average in terms of quarterback touchdowns in the last 4 games. Now, again, note that does include some pretty decent quarterbacks, right? They're not allowing a lot of pass catching touchdowns in general, right? So when we look at, okay, well, where could that upside be in terms of rushing yards? Will they give him a lot of room in terms of rushing yards? Now you look at Green Bay. Green Bay has offered around 59 rushing yards total in the last 4 games. And now that's to consider the quarterbacks that they're playing are not necessarily rushing quarterbacks. Okay. But you're looking at over the last 4 games were the Bears, the Lions, the Vikings, and the Giants. And that Giants game did not feature Jackson Dart. So you have a lot of quarterbacks that are just standing in the pocket. So that's not necessarily taking that stat into account. Okay. So while I think Aaron Rodgers is probably going to throw for 2 touchdowns against this Miami secondary, I do. Bo will probably get a decent amount of rushing attempts to make him very relevant. But the problem, again, like I said, is the total pass attempts. Looking at those last 4 quarterbacks, Joe, that you see New York playing. This is an exercise we did last week when you weren't here, okay? Caleb Williams, 186 yards, 35 pass attempts. Jared Goff, 26 pass attempts, 256 yards, 2 touchdowns. J.J. McCarthy, we don't even need to talk about him.
Nope.
Jameis Winston, 29 pass attempts, 201 yards, and an interception. That feels like Bo Nix's outcomes to me will be somewhere in that 220 to 269, somewhere in there, with the potential of no touchdowns to 2 touchdowns and the potential for 50 yards on the ground with a touchdown. I think that is enough for me to sway me away from Aaron Rodgers, because I don't see the yardage for Aaron Rodgers there. Now, you said, do you not want to go with Shedeur? And you already took Shedeur off the table. But because this is a deep dive, Joe, I am going to talk about Shedeur. Okay? Now, I know what I said earlier about talking too much about Shedeur is not a great thing. And that's...
It's not. So keep it to the point.
That's fine.
You also got me on a shot clock.
But when we look at Shedeur, over the last several, or when we look at the Bears over the last 4 weeks, they have offered around 7 total touchdowns to quarterbacks in total. Okay. And when we look at the Bears matchups over the last several weeks, again, Jordan Love, who doesn't throw for a lot of touchdowns, threw for 3 touchdowns. Against the Eagles, Jalen Hurts threw for 2 touchdowns. Against the Steelers, Mason Rudolph threw for a touchdown and 100 yards. And against the Vikings, J.J. McCarthy threw for a touchdown and 150 yards on 32 attempts. So while I don't think on paper Shedeur is better than Bo, I do think that because of what we know about both of these matchups is that they are constantly letting Bo Nix do things that he should probably not do. They are going to do the same thing with Shedeur over the next coming weeks because Shedeur is their starting quarterback. He has the room to make the mistakes if he makes the mistakes. So for me, the outcome for this decision would probably come to what that weather looked like, because there is supposed to be a decent amount of snow coming the way of that, Midwest. And wherever that game is taking place, that could be a little bit dicey. But Shedeur did play at Colorado. So that does kind of...
Colorado is not the same as Lake Effect snow.
I get it. But again, I think that Shedeur has a little bit more upside than Aaron Rodgers. So if it came down to it, I'd be dropping Aaron Rodgers and then ultimately making the decision on Sunday if I wanted to play Bo and Shedeur. I'd most likely start Bo because I do think that they let him do things that he's not supposed to do. But I do not want to undersell the potential for Shedeur this week. That's all. But I am definitely not playing Aaron Rodgers.
You're definitely not playing Aaron Rodgers.
In a full PPR league, I need 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a flex. Genty, Hampton, Neal, Nico, Ted, Igbuka, and Fannin is a flex possibility. I also have McBride locked and loaded at tight end, as you should. So getting to this comment here, and as a deep dive here, Michael, when we look at this, and I see these group of players, I think that, again, Genty is one of those players that I am absolutely starting, but I'm very not comfortable about it. And the reason that I'm not comfortable about it is because Philadelphia can stack the box. And they stack the box, you can unwrite any story or any narrative that you can make about Ashton Genty. So
this was the end of Genty. We all knew this from the start of the season. You don't want to play him in this week.
So while I want to start him, what Joe just said is absolutely fair and right. There is a story that
Neal turned on.
There's a story that I can paint that Genty sits on my bench and Neal and Hampton are the 2 running backs that I play.
I think that's the starting point we move forward with this question, because I think that's the logical answer.
So then at wide receiver, it is going to be Nico and Ted at wide receiver for sure. Okay? Yeah. No matter how much you hate Teteroa McMillan, Joe,
that's a big number.
He is the play. All right? So then this looks at your flex. So you're looking at Genty, Igbuka, or Harold Fannin in your flex. And all pictures, depending on weather, point me in the direction that Harold Fannin is the better flex this week than both Ashton Genty and Emeka Igbuka. And if you would have told me, I would have said that.
See, today, I saw there's a toss-up between Igbuka and Fannin, but if Njoku's healthy, I would go Igbuka.
And because it's a deep dive, just throwing the stats out there over the last 4 games, okay? When we look at this matchup for Harold Fannin, okay, let me go to it here on paper here. So Chicago, on average over the last 4 games, has given up around 6.5 targets to tight ends. We take those totals over the last 4 games, and we find Fannin again, and we see, okay, how can this work out in our favor? That's 26 total targets to tight ends over the last 4 weeks. And the completion percentage to tight ends has been relatively good. The yardage has been relatively good, but not anything to write home about. Then there's that 1 touchdown in there as well. Again, if we look at Chicago over the last several weeks, who did they play? Well, you've got Luke Musgrave. You have Dallas Goedert, who Dallas Goedert didn't prove that he did anything in that game at all. He had 2 for 27. Then you look at the Steelers against the Bears as well, and you look at the Steelers tight ends. They didn't really do that much in that game either. So you ask yourself, well, there is limited upside in the amount of yards that Fannin will have, but also there's a limited upside in the total amount of yards that Cleveland will have in general. So the reason that you might not want to play Fannin is that Igbuka in general, it is better to start a wide receiver or a running back in that flex spot than a tight end because of the overall upside. Mm-hmm. But what you have to consider is that out of the 3 players, Genti, Igbuka, and Fannin, it is reasonable to assume that Fannin has more touchdown upside than the other 2. So that's kind of where this discussion takes a turn, right? Where Igbuka's matchup is better. It's a better matchup. The wide receivers for Tampa have a clear, better pathway for more targets than Harold Fannin this week. Okay? There's way more targets in the pool for those wide receivers. The only question is Baker feeling healthy enough to give them all of them 6 to 8 targets? And all things being the same, right? I think it's very reasonable to assume, like I said earlier, that Igbuka falls somewhere in that 6 to 8 targets. But he's been catching about half them. So they have been kind of lame duck targets. Now with Shedeur, are they better targets for Harold Fannin? That's the question that I think that you have to ask yourself before you make this ultimate decision of who to start, who to sit. And for me, right, is that if Shedeur is going to throw the rock around and going to give Harold Fannin 8-10 targets, then he's athletic enough and the quarterback's healthy enough that it's reasonable to start Harold Fannin. But everything that I said about Igbuka is absolutely true. And I think that it lands you with Ashton Genti on the bench and a decision that, do you want to start Igbuka in your wide receiver slot today or on Thursday? You put Tet in the flex, or do you want to just bench Igbuka entirely and then play Nico, Tet, and then Fannin? I think that decision is something that you've got to think about, but it's not one that has Ashton Genti in the conversation. Jesse. In the playoffs in 2 out of the 3 leagues. Thanks, y'all.
Good job, Jess.
Appreciate it, Jesse. Appreciate it. Which running back would you start in order between Hall, Monangai, Corum, Singletary, Wright? Well, if Devin Achan's not playing, and you won't know that until probably Sunday night, Saturday night.
It'll be too late. You can't rely on Wright.
I'd be starting Jalen Wright. Unfortunately, it's on Monday because the Steelers are not that great against the run. We know this.
If Achan's out, Wright probably jumps to second. But I think it goes Monangai if Achan's out right, then Hall, Algier, Corum. Singletary's probably ahead of Algier.
So for me, the ranking that I would give this would be Wright would be number 1. Everything that I'm looking at says that Achan is, again, questionable. He may require a week to rest with his ribs. So if you're going to know more about this probably Saturday. They're going to give us more information about this on Saturday ultimately. But even an unhealthy Achan, if Achan's not healthy, I do think it's reasonable that Jalen Wright does presume a lot of work in this matchup. Now, whether that goes Ollie Gordon or Jalen Wright's way, that's...
Well, they gave Wright the goal line touchdown last week.
But Jalen Wright, for me, would be the top one out of this grouping of guys based upon matchup alone. Okay? Because the Steelers have not been exceptional by any
that's
means.
Fair. Again, if Achan's out, it's a no doubt you play Wright.
Okay.
I do put an argument in for Monangai, but I'll give you Wright. I just don't see us knowing that for sure before 1 o'clock on Sunday.
Then after that, it would be Monangai.
Monangai's the other one.
For every reason that I said about total opportunities being shared, right? Cleveland offers about 25 rush attempts per game. If you look at that, that's going to be a nice even split for them. They offer a good amount of rushing touchdowns on the year. It's Monangai. Then you go down the pipeline even more. And I think, again, what I said about Devin Singletary, I think is still true about Devin Singletary and Tyrone Tracy. While there's not while we can't definitively say what that split will look like, there's 27 opportunities on the table. Okay. And if those 27 opportunities are fully taken advantage of, then you add in the possible targets, which is about 6. So that's potentially 33 total touches that the running backs in this game can get. So if you have 33 potential touches in this running back room, that there is no reason to not put a marker on Devin Singletary. Yes, he can absolutely trash your season, right? If he doesn't get those touchdowns. But again, the same thing can be said about all the other running backs on this list. So for me, it's Wright, Monangai, and Singletary because of those stats putting out there.
And for me, it would be Wright. So again, assuming A-Chain's out,
then
Wright,
Joe,
Monangai, and I would go with Hall before Singletary.
But I want to tell you why not Hall. Why not Hall?
I'm all for hating on Jets.
Okay, this is the reason, and because it's a deep dive, Jesse, you get this love, right? But here's the stat to be aware of for Breece Hall. Over the last 4 games, the Jaguars have allowed a total of 59 rushing attempts, which is the second lowest in the league. Okay, and you look at those matchups, right? They played the Rams, 12 carries from Kyron. They played the Raiders, Genty, 13 carries. They played the Cardinals. Michael Carter was the rushing leader with 5 carries for 28 yards. And then this past week, they played Tony Pollard, 10 carries for 60 yards. Or not last week, but 10 carries for 60 yards November 30th, right? So you look at it and you say to yourself, all right, well, going to the Jags game that just happened this past week, Jonathan Taylor, 21 carries. Obviously, he's the most exceptional running back out of that bunch of guys. Breece Hall is not Jonathan Taylor.
Nope.
The offensive line for the Jets is not the offensive line for the Colts. And the quarterback for the Colts is not the same quarterback as the quarterback for the Jets. So
It might be this week.
I don't see a picture that even when a running back is relied upon, Joe, like in the matchups that I stated, Riley Leonard got 29 attempts in that game. Jonathan Taylor got 21 total carries in that game. And that was the highest of the grouping. Now, when you look at it from a yardage perspective, it's an even worse picture to paint for Breece Hall because they have offered the least amount of yards in the last 4 weeks to the total number of running backs. Now, where this picture changes is in the target category. If Breece Hall is going to have a good game, it's going to come through the air, which Breece Hall absolutely could do that with. But if the quarterback can't get him the ball, that's very problematic. And that's why I say that I don't really want any of that matchup. So he's actually below Blake Corum and Algier for me this week.
And that's fine. There's a lot of depth to that.
And then because of everything that I said, I do think Algier is interesting this week from the perspective that there is a decent amount of reception yards to go around here for Atlanta potentially. The rush attempts are going to be very limited. So Tyler Algier does fall, because of the rush attempts being limited, and he's used primarily as the running back. And then Corum. So Corum is like total wild card, right? So for me, it'd be Wright, Monangai, Singletary, Corum, Algier, Hall. But you can easily walk into Monangai and Singletary if you're concerned that Wright won't get a full complement of snaps.
And that's fine. That's the volume here.
CC.
Bob, this is going to be my last one.
Going on to this deep dive before we get back to the quick hitters, guys. We will get back to all the quick hitters. We are local football flavor. We do answer every question that comes in. Phillip Rivers has always been a statue quarterback. Other than slightly better arm talent, Matthew Stafford is basically the same. What's a realistic outcome here for the Colts skill players?
Horrible, because he doesn't know the playbook yet. I mean, there's nothing you can do that will change that. He can be talented. It's going to have to be a watered-down playbook. The giant difference that people are comparing this to is Flacco showing up on Thursday Night Football. There is no one on Indianapolis that is close to Jamar Chase. So this Indianapolis offense is incredibly play action dependent. And the biggest thing that takes the longest to develop is the play action passing game. It requires you to have confidence in looking away from the field and turning around and throwing it back. He is slower, he has worse reaction time, and this is not an offense that is conducive to coming off the couch. This is going to be horrendous for all of them. The one who has the chance for getting the best outcome, regardless of who they pick, is Pittman. And the reason is because Pittman is the big one who's close to the line of scrimmage and will be able to get something. Pierce is probably in big-time trouble. Warren is a 50-50. He's a rookie who knows how that's going to be favorable in the former Hall of Famers' eyes or future Hall of Famers' eyes. I look at this as Pittman's the only one I'd even slightly invest in, but I ain't doing that either. This is JT or nothing if you're going.
Yeah, honestly, like that's the answer to that question there. Just to put a little stat back up into it, over the last 4 games now, again, Seattle's played some pretty shitty quarterbacks outside of Matt Stafford, but 168 yards on average over the last 4 games that they have given up. If you look at that if you take it away from its average and you just look at that on paper, 674 passing yards in total over the last 4 games. Again, though, they played J.J. McCarthy, blank J.J. McCarthy. They played Kirk Cousins. They played Cam Ward. Cam Ward had the best yardage total out of all of them at 256 yards. Matt Stafford basically stopped throwing the ball, 28 pass attempts, but only 130 yards. That's the game where Sam Darnold threw for 4 interceptions. So I can't see a world where even playing Jonathan Taylor is a little bit suspect right now but Phillip Rivers is probably going to hand him the ball 30 times.
Easily. And
on 30 attempts, it's very likely that Jonathan Taylor is going to eclipse 100 yards. So I just don't see a world, CC, where Phillip Rivers is going to be absolutely relevant. Now, everything says, oh, he looks good. Yeah, comparatively speaking. But my question is that why do you go out there, bring Phillip Rivers out of retirement when there are other quarterbacks on other practice squads in the league right now? You would rather have Phillip Rivers over. I don't know what that says about the league as a whole, though, Joe, which is very concerning that you have to go to Phillip Rivers, who has been retired and either announcing or on the couch or coaching football somewhere, that you would want to go into that. I wouldn't. I don't see it. And Joe, this is the last deep dive that was on the slate before I go back to the quick hitters. In one of my home leagues, we play week 18. Which team should I target and who will be competitive in week 18? Who's to say definitively who will be competitive? But if I'm going week 18, I'm actually going after teams that aren't hyper competitive and just playing to play. So Jackson Dart is probably going to get a good game against the Cowboys. The Cowboys are probably going to be the Cowboys and miss the playoffs and be who they are.
I mean, if your question is who are the bubble teams going to be, they'll still be relevant in week 18. Baltimore will still be relevant because the Steelers will not close the door. They don't know how to. So that's probably your best hit one. The rest of them are Buffalo will probably have wrapped up a wild card spot by then, but not be able to get a playoff spot. So that game will basically be useless. Tonight or this weekend will really dictate that. In terms of the rest of them, Houston will probably be fighting in week 18. That will matter, given where their division is, and Joe, the Chargers and Chiefs. I mean, those would be the ones from the AFC to look at.
Yeah. So when I look at week 18 right now, I definitely have my eye on the Panthers-Bucks game week 18. Because both of those teams are going to be hyper-competitive right now. And like Joe said, the Texans-Colts game is probably going to be hyper-competitive to a degree, depending on the quarterback situation, right? Then I come down, and my next eye that I have is actually whoever the Eagles' backup quarterback is. They are playing the Commanders.
That's fair.
So I have my eye on Will Shipley. I have my eye on Tank Bigsby. I have my eye on whoever the backup is. If it's still Tanner McKee, I'm very interested in that. Obviously, I still have my eye on the Bears in week 18.
They'll be desperate because they'll probably be on the outside looking in by then.
And they're playing the Lions. That game does have playoff implications because the Lions are on the outside looking in right now. And if there's a chance that game is anything like it was like a couple years ago, or that Packers game was a couple years ago, Dan Campbell's going to show out and Caleb Williams is going to have to match. And so that's the game. That game right there is probably the game that I have my eye on the most, is that Lions-Bears game. But also, like I said, I do have my eye on the Eagles backups because they are playing Washington, and Washington is atrocious.
All right, Bob, you bring this one home.
All right, we'll bring this one home. I got to see where we last stopped at here, guys. So we stopped at McSkippy here, and then Quincy, and then Dirt. We got you, Nick. We got you. Chicago's D is bad. There's no doubt about that. Nino, we're getting back into all the quick hitters, guys. So if you're still with us, we appreciate. We are Local Football Flavor. We do answer every question here. If you needed to tap out and come back in, feel free to go back. We probably answered your question as long as it was before Nino's here at the 4:50 mark. So this question came about an hour ago. I need one wide receiver, one flex, full PPR, and the big play bonus. Nino, I love the big play bonus. Jacoby, Jaden Higgins, Chuba, Algier, Hunt, and Burton. Well, as I said, Hunt has no real big play bonus, but he does have that touchdown upside on a week-to-week basis. When we look at Luther Burden, it's difficult to know for sure how Luther Burden will end up this week. Well, the matchup isn't like anything to write home about. He does have that kind of big play opportunities, as you can see it. The targets have been pretty similar the last 2 weeks. And even if you go into the third week back, around 5 targets. So it's definitely the opportunities will be there if Rome is hurt. However, I am on Jacoby Myers this week. When we look at that, Jacoby Myers is definitely the guy that I have starting. And like we've talked about all episode, and you can go back to all the questions about Chuba. Chuba's interesting enough. If you think that they're going to be on third down more often than not, then Chuba is the guy that you want to start out of this grouping of players. If you don't think that, then Jaden Higgins has been giving enough targets in a matchup on paper that is good. That's good enough for a guy like Jaden Higgins to potentially overperform in a game. So I think right now, as we sit on Wednesday, that I would lean a little bit into Jaden Higgins and Jacoby. If I wanted to, I think that Chuba and Burden are the guys that you could pivot out of Jaden Higgins into. And I would lean a little bit Chuba if I wanted to pivot out of Jaden Higgins. Algier and Hunt are just not doing enough to make that happen. Igbuka, Olave, and Jennings start one full PPR. Well, for me, that's Olave. Now, when we look at that when we look at all the stat sheets that we have, right, is that Jennings' matchup is going to be a good matchup for him. The opportunities are going to be there. He's going to get 6 targets minimum. Okay. But Olave kind of walks into that same kind of conversation. When fully healthy, he's a 6 target guy minimum as well. I think that both Jennings and Olave are going to have similar-ish weeks. I'm probably avoiding Igbuka this week. While the targets are going to be there, I'm just not sure the yardage total will be there. And I tend to lean a little bit more on Olave. But just understand that Olave and Jennings are full of injuries right now. So if you do have concerns about those guys, check the injury report come Saturday. I lean Olave. Jennings is fair enough to lean into. I also need one running back and 2 flexes. Marks, ETN, Harvey, K9, Neal, T. Higgins, Jammo. Okay. So as I've said all episode, that I do think that Woody Marks is a great play this week. When we look at the total number of opportunities for running backs, the opportunity marker is there for Woody Marks to be successful against this Arizona team. We saw Blake Corum. We saw Kyron Williams. If we go through the exercise that we did last week, guys, and we look at just the Arizona Cardinals schedule over the last 4 games in general to see basically where that adjustment is at, right? Against the Buccaneers, Bucky Irving had 61 yards. Against the Jaguars, Travis Etienne had 86 yards. And against the 49ers, Christian McCaffrey did Christian McCaffrey things like he always does. So for me right now, The better matchups on the slate are Marks and ETN. So I'm going to start there. Marks and ETN is absolutely the two guys that I definitely want to play. Now this really comes down to taking a look at those other 5 guys. Because Marks and ETN are the players that you do want to start this week out of that grouping based upon total opportunities. Okay. When you go to the next best option and you're looking at total opportunities, then it potentially walks into Ken Walker. Indianapolis has given up a lot of running back opportunities over the last 4 games. On a per game basis, that's 28 total attempts. And again, the problem with this is that those carries are unevenly distributed most weeks. Some weeks he gets 55%, some weeks he's down to 35, some weeks he's at 45. So I think despite those total opportunities, that it potentially can be a problem to rely on Ken Walker this week. However, where this comes as a potential benefit is that if they are starting Phillip Rivers, then this Seattle defense will be able to capitalize on that and give Ken Walker more opportunities. That's something to think about. Then going down the list, RJ Harvey. The opportunities are going to be there for RJ Harvey. The yards are going to be there for RJ Harvey, but will the touchdowns be there? That's what you want out of RJ Harvey. RJ Harvey has gotten 17 and 13 carries respectively the last 2 weeks, and he's gotten around 10 total targets the last 2 weeks. Green Bay offers around 5 total targets to running backs on a per week basis over the last 4 weeks. So when I look at this and I say, okay, Harvey and K9 are interesting. The opportunities will be there, but how many opportunities and what will those opportunities look like? Then come down to Devin Neal. Similarly, for anybody that's asked about Devin Neal, right? The opportunities will be there for Devin Neal. The touchdown upside will be there for Devin Neal. The running back rushing yards will be there for Devin Neal. So that's all looking in Devin Neal's favor as well. But then you get to these wide receivers, Nino. And if T's playing, you want to start T, but it doesn't look like T's going to be playing. So then you look at Jamo, right? And you say, holy cow, the Rams have been good on defense against wide receivers, but over the last 4 weeks, they have allowed 18 total targets a game to wide receivers, which is great. And then you look at receiving touchdowns, it's even better. So Jamo is one of those guys that if Amon-Ra is dinged up and not playing exceptionally well, whatever, that he can be absolutely a lightning rod. You know what you're going to get. You're either going to get a 0 or you're going to get a 17 or higher. So the question is, how much risk do you want to take this week, Nino? The matchup does favor Jamo. The matchups do favor K9 over Harvey and Neal. But K9 and Jamo are both problematic in their overall outputs. So for me, I do lean a little bit on Marks, a little bit on ETN as my starting guys. I don't think any of these guys are the wrong start this week necessarily. So then picking the next flex, I think I lean on Harvey because I feel like the opportunities are better. So I'd go Marks, ETN, and Harvey as my 3 players, but I don't really have a problem with K9, Neal, or Jamo this week at all. Once you're out, you can't touch the waiver wire. That goes back to Michael's question. Riley Leonard fully practiced today, so Pittman's is still a strong start. Frosty, sure. I mean, again, though, Riley Leonard first start last week. How exceptional will he be is a very good question, right? So we talked a little bit about why Phillip Rivers would be problematic. But again, the same thing I said about Phillip Rivers is the same problem that I have with Riley Leonard. It's just that Seattle is not presenting the opportunities for these passers to really excel. So Riley Leonard isn't really going to excel. Will Michael Pittman potentially excel? Sure. Michael Pittman can excel if Riley Leonard is going to be the quarterback. I'm starting May with Brissett on the bench. Do I drop Brissett to stash Burton, Wright, Mason, JCM, or just hold a backup quarterback, 10-team PPR? I think you can drop Brissett to pick up Jalen Wright. I think Jalen Wright this week would be the better stash, knowing that if somebody picks him up and plays him Monday night against you, he absolutely can destroy you. Brissett this week is probably not going to lose you the game if you play against him. Now, going to week 17, Cardinals play the Bengals. How good have quarterbacks been against the Bengals recently? Well, they've been getting around 29 total pass attempts, and that's well within Brissett's purview. So if you do want to drop Brissett, you can. I'd drop him for Jalen Wright, but I ultimately wouldn't make that decision until I really knew if Jalen Wright was going to play a full complement of snaps, because I do think that Brissett could burn you next week if you don't have him playing against you, right? He could definitely burn you. Yeah, if it's old school waiver wire order, Michael, that should be yours. Even though it's 10 team, everyone's holding multiple quarterbacks. So if May gets injured, it's GG. Yeah, I feel that. So going back to that, Josh, then don't bench or don't drop him. Is there an extra tight end, extra wide receiver that you'd rather drop for Wright? I feel like there should be. I feel like there could be. And that's what's up. Quincy's undefeated. He's undefeated in the chat, undefeated in our hearts, undefeated in his league. Do I bench Igbuka, Ferguson, or Jalen Warren? Out of those guys, I think I could bench Ferguson. Ferguson's targets are going to be around 6. Every reason that I told you guys earlier about Jalen Warren and Aaron Rodgers could absolutely come true this week. It really depends on how they view the snap share going forward. Now, Miami has only been offering around 19 total rushing attempts over the last 4 weeks to running backs. Okay. But then you look at what they've done, what that schedule has looked like over the last 4 weeks. They've played some decent and not so decent running backs, right? They've played Brees. They played Devin Neal. They played Chris Rodriguez, and they played James Cook. Then prior to that, they played Derrick Henry. Well, Derrick Henry had 119 yards against them. James Cook had 53 yards against them. We go down to the Commanders. Rodriguez had 79 yards against them. Devin Neal had 47 yards against them. And then Brees last week had 43 yards against them. So you're probably going to see somewhere in the middle. But if you're splitting those opportunities between Gainwell and Warren, then it might not be a picture that you want to paint. But I think that Jalen Warren will still have more opportunities to produce than Ferguson. And that's why I say it's okay to bench Ferguson in a matchup that's going to be a little bit tricky. I need to drop one. Garrett Wilson coming off the IR. Igbuka, Myers, Swift, or one of my tight ends. If Garrett Wilson's coming back from the IR, I think it's fair enough to drop one of the tight ends, whichever tight end you don't prefer. But I wouldn't. If it's going to prevent you from making roster moves, yeah, I think you gotta do that sooner rather than later. But I'm not seeing that he's coming off IR. 5 hours ago, CBS Sports reports that there's no change to his IR status, so I don't think you need to do that yet, Quincy. Again, guys, if you just joined us, we are Local Football Flavor. Joe just kicked out, but we'll be with you. We're going to answer all the questions. We answer all the questions here at Local Football Flavor. So, yeah, if I'm going to drop one, it's going to be the tight end, and I don't think you need to do it yet. Zai, I secured the bye, but I'm concerned about CD Pickens and the Cowboys in general. With the Eagles' schedule, will they have anything to play for? I don't think that they would stop playing, because it's still the Dallas Cowboys, guys. And they're still multi-million-dollar team. Okay. And when I look at the Dallas Cowboys schedule, they have the Vikings, the Chargers, and the Commanders, and then the Giants. This is a schedule that absolutely I am not concerned about for the Cowboys at all. Now you say, look a little bit at the Eagles schedule. And yeah, the Eagles schedule is just as juicy. Raiders, Bills, Commanders, Commanders again. But also, like, anything can happen on a week-to-week basis. I'm just not that concerned there. Who would you rather have rest of the season, Sutton or Watson? I'd rather have Watson. Watson has more touchdown upside because Jordan Love is passing for more touchdowns than Bo Nix right now. And I'd rather take the touchdown upside. You're not going to sit your stars multiple weeks. I have no problem with the Dallas Cowboys moving forward. I think it's going to be fine. I really do. Ted or Wandale this week, CC? That's a really good question. It's probably closer than most people think. Now, you'd have to take coverages to an account here. And I don't yet have that data fully accumulated yet. So if we just take it based on strictly opportunities, right, is that Washington – over the last 4 games has been allowing 33 fantasy points per game to wide receivers. And while that's really just league average, right? It's not exceptional. It's not crazy terrible at all. And that's coming on around 15 total targets, around 144 yards. Where I'm looking at here for Wan'Dale, though, is that number of targets. Because in order for Wan'Dale to have a successful game, he needs to be over-targeted. Jackson Dart loves to over-target Wan'Dale Robinson. When we go and look at over the last couple of weeks, right, 11 targets, 9 targets, 13 targets, 8 targets. And it is very easy to move the ball against Washington. Washington's secondary is trash, okay? So I do like Wan'Dale this week. Now, when we take a look at Tet, for example, Tet's matchup is slightly worse. On the season, or over the last 4 games, the Saints have been allowing 19 fantasy points per game to wide receivers. Usually this is because that the Saints are back in comeback mode, so they have to catch up. And around 12 targets with around 8 receptions. While the yardage total doesn't concern me, it's that total number of 8 receptions for the whole entire wide receiver pool. So you take a look at it and you say, okay, who have the Saints faced over the last 4 weeks? So let's take a look at it, right? The Saints have faced the Buccaneers, right? Baker completed 14 passes in that game. Godwin was the highest, 5 for 55. They faced the Dolphins. Achane had the highest rushing yards. The highest receiver was Darren Waller. Then they go to the Falcons. Falcons played the Saints. Let's pull it up here. That is not loading. I don't know why. Interesting. And then you go back to when they played the Panthers. And Tet had 5 for 60. So while Tet's probably not going to have a bad game, I think Wan'Dale is probably going to have a better game. But the thing that you want to look at with Tet is that there is projectable touchdown upside with Tet, and it's a little bit murkier to find that with Wan'Dale. So if you want the touchdown, I think Tet's the play. But if you want the volume, I think that Wan'Dale is a great play. Rodriguez popping up on the injury report today on Wednesday is not that much of a concern for me, but I would check back Thursday and Friday to see if it's a long-term concern. What's up, Matt? How's it going? I'm starting Amon-Ra, Jameson Williams, Stephon Diggs, or Terry McLaurin as my wide receiver too. I think you start both of the wide receivers for Detroit. I think it's okay to leave Terry McLaurin on the bench. If you want to position yourself in the Diggs, that's fine. But again, I'm not really incredibly nervous for Detroit at all. They do cannibalize each other just a little bit, but in general, I'm not concerned about that. I'm not concerned about that this week. So when I look at it and I say, all right, is it okay to bench Stephon Diggs? Let's take a look. Yeah, I mean, it is okay to bench Stephon Diggs. Again, the nature of the New England is that Drake May is going to pass the ball to whoever's open. If Stephon Diggs is open, he's going to get the ball. Last time they played Buffalo, he went 3 for 43 yards. So the opportunities are not going to be as plentiful, I think, as they will be for Amon-Ra and Jameson Williams. So I'm going to start both Detroit players over Terry and over Stephon Diggs. I need 2 flex spots, Diggs, Pollard, Rodriguez, or Burton. So, Alexander, you heard everything that I said about Rodriguez earlier. Rodriguez does have the better matchup. He had the better matchup last week. But again, when we look at players that are not – when we look at teams that are not good at scoring touchdowns, it's really hard to start a running back that has really not a lot of huge upside, right? And when I look at it in terms of this question right now, I think there's a lot of moving parts. Rodriguez, as KJ just said, popped up on the injury report. That's a concern. Double checking and making sure that Rome Odunze is potentially hurt is also a concern. So there's a lot of moving parts to answer this question on Wednesday. I think tentatively speaking, Pollard had an exceptional game last week. There's no doubt about that. But he has been mainly irrelevant all year. Now, San Francisco does not have an exceptional defense. But again, in this game, it was very much a back and forth game, back and forth. You guys know I like to say that. In the San Francisco game, I'm not quite sure how back and forth it will be with Christian McCaffrey and Brock Purdy, but it has a chance to get there. So I know he has been much maligned all year. And again, I do not see a very high projection for Pollard at all, around 10 points. But in a matchup that is slightly better than we want to give it credit for, I think you do lean Tony Pollard in this case. If you wanted to rock with, again, if you want to rock with Rodriguez, cool, that's fine. Again, when we look at San Francisco overall, they've only allowed around 18 rushing attempts per game over the last 4 games. There's a lot of reasons why that has happened, but they have been giving up some touchdowns. They have been giving up some rushing yards. When we look at it from a quarterback perspective, though, San Francisco has been allowing a good amount of passing yards. And if Cam Ward can move the ball, I do trust Tony Pollard in this game, and I know that's weird to say. So Tony Pollard would be a guy that I would be very interested in this week. And then I would be interested in Burden and Diggs, but I'd have to know if Rome was hurt. If Rome was still hurt, I'd lean a little bit more into Luther Burden and Pollard. But I do have very good reason to believe that Diggs will be a good play this week in certain situations. Definitely not over Amon-Ra or Jamison Williams, but in this situation, I think Pollard and Diggs could be a very reasonable start this week, Alex, based off of what we know right now. Judkins had 14 attempts last week and had 26 yards. That's why I want to sit Judkins. He had a solid reception that got him some fantasy points, but those yards were scary. It absolutely is. And McSkippy, here's the problem, is that Judkins has been generating negative yards on a lot of carries as well. So the opportunities are good enough, but they're not as many as that. It's not enough to say, do I want to take this on, right? Jane Reed is not worth picking up in my book. You know, I said this about Devin Neal a couple weeks ago too. For some people, Devin Neal, like I said, it's good to have an extra running back. But Jane Reed provides no upside right now. You know what he is. He could get 4 targets. He could get 8 targets. He could go for 100 yards. He could go for 2 yards. He could go for 0 yards. There is no reason why they definitely have to do that. I am off Jane Reed for sure. No dice on JJ. Again, you guys heard me rant about this 2 weeks in a row, right? 2 weeks in a row. Michael, I need to know, what's the bullshit that he's on? All right. We'll get to that in a moment. Zai, I'll get to that question there. It's the playoffs, and people will tell you start your studs, but right now Justin Jefferson is not a fantasy stud. Starting Fannin over Ferguson, PPR flex, 1 Ferg, Monty, or Pierce. So for all the reasons, Ricardo, that we talked about the quarterback situation, I don't think, while I love Alec Pierce, and you will not get me to not like Alec Pierce, I don't think he's a reasonable play. I'm in the playoffs in my league as well, and I'm benching him. Okay. Ferg is not a guy that I want to start in the flex. He's not enough. He doesn't get enough points to generate you good flex numbers. He's a solid floor kind of play, right? He's going to be somewhere in that 9 to 12. Okay. So if you're comfortable with having 9 to 12 in your flex, then albeit Ferg is a comfortable start. He is the less scary out of the grouping. David Montgomery, on the other hand, is very much interesting to me this week. Okay. The matchup on paper is bad. He's not getting enough carries. Okay. 6, 5, 7, 6. But he does have that touchdown upside on a week-to-week basis. So putting all that together, Ricardo, Ferg probably has a higher floor than both Pierce and Montgomery this week. So if you need the higher floor, I think then it's fair to play Ferg. Okay. Just know I don't realistically see a touchdown in Ferguson this week. Nick, we talked about this earlier in the show. I'm still on Bowers this week because he's basically the only game in town. Doesn't mean it's good game, right? But he's basically the only game in town. I do have some hesitation here with the quarterback situation and how much pressure they do get on Geno. I could see them basically wiping Bowers away and allowing and seeing what Trey Tucker can do. But by doing that, they're not going to get as much pressure on Geno. So I think because they want to get pressure on Geno, you're going to see some nice releases for Brock Bowers. And I think that Brock Bowers has a good game. Will it be better than Harold Fannin? It depends on who gets the touchdown. I think both are good starts this week. My lean is to Bowers, but I love Fannin this week. And Ricardo, we answered this question a little bit in terms of like what we think about the total overall outcomes of these matchups. And while the Falcons do suck, Baker is hurt. I think you have to lean on Purdy there. Zai, we'll get into that deep dive in a moment. Bijan or Judkins this week? Jesse, this is diabolical, my friend. diabolical. It's still Bijan. Now, Bijan against Tampa's defensive line, the opportunities are going to be interesting. Let's just say that. But the last time they played Tampa Bay, I don't believe Vita Vea played. He had 100 receiving yards and only 24 rushing yards. So that is an outcome that's definitely possible. Okay. When we look at the likelihood of that outcome happening, it's strong, right? So looking at the matchup on paper, right, is that when we take a look at Bijan, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have been fairly solid against the rush all season. 18 total attempts on the ground per game. Okay. Now, where that changes things is in the reception yard pool. Is that over the last 4 weeks, they have been allowing around 4 receptions and 58 yards. Okay. So we go and we say, okay, well, who have the Buccaneers faced over the last 4 games again? There you got Devin Neal. You've got the Cardinals running back, so Michael Carter, Amari DiMercato. You have Kyren, you have Corum, and you have James Cook. Well, you see that Kyren had 46 yards. And in the passing game, we look at the receptions here, and Kyren only had 1. So not great, right? Then you look at James Cook, who I think profiles in that same capacity, right? 48 yards against the Buccaneers defense. And then in the passing game, he had 3 receptions for 66 yards. So I do think that there will be more opportunities for Judkins, but everything that I've said earlier about Judkins, I think is still true this week. I would roll with Bijan, but I think this question is closer than most people think. So bench Genti this week in PPR. He's getting like 8 targets a week lately, pretty much, and he falls in the end zone too. He could really pay off. Neal doesn't really catch the balls. I'm going to tell you what we see here in the stats, and ultimately you can make that decision based off of that, right? So we see 19 carries from Devin Neal, 1 reception, 14 carries, 3 receptions, 7 carries, 7 targets against Atlanta, 5 receptions. So the usage really is dependent, right? Now, in order to free up some space, maybe they get the play action pass working for the Raiders. Maybe. All right. So then you look at it and you say, all right, well, what about Ashton Genti? Okay. What about Ashton Genti? Ashton Genti got 10 carries, 15 carries, 8 targets, 4 targets, pretty good numbers, right? And while the Eagles have not been absolutely exceptional against the rushing game over the last several weeks, the Raiders are different. What we know about the Raiders is that if you can attack Geno Smith, then you can cause panic for the whole team if you cannot generate pressure against these teams, right? And I just want to go through the Eagles' last 4 opponents so we can see. They've been allowing an exceptional amount of rushing attempts to running backs. This is true, right? In this Bears game, you had 130 yards for Kyle Monangai. Then you had, in the Chargers, you had 10 carries for 66 yards for Herbert. That doesn't look good, right? Then you had Javonte, 20 carries for 87 yards. And then you had, against the Lions, you had Jahmyr Gibbs go for 39 yards. So outside of that Kyle Monangai game, you're not looking at something like that that's like uber exceptional. Josh Jacobs, also 74 yards the game before that. And then we go to the Giants game. Tyrone Tracy, 39 yards, leader in the clubhouse in terms of yards there. So if you can generate pressure against a team, I think the Eagles project better, right? Is that you're generating all that pressure. Now, when it comes to the targets here, Tyrone Tracy, 2 targets. Devin Singletary, 1 target. So it's really dependent on how much pressure they can generate. So I would bench him, but I think you can make a responsible decision based off of who you think is going to get more total opportunities. The opportunities should be there for Genti. But again, if they are pressured, those opportunities are going to look different. Maybe he does pop. But I think he'll pop if he gets those targets. And I'm not quite sure that that's there. Now, they're in the consolation bracket. If you're out you're out. If you're not, you can't cock block somebody else who made the playoffs when you didn't. I fully endorse that. I think that the consolation waiver wire should come after the main waiver wire. I think it's bullshit. I really do. I even told him the two hosts of a podcast I watch on YouTube said, the commission needed to fix the issue and that wasn't fair. And that people were even in the comments section say it wasn't fair and the commission needs to reverse it. So basically I told him that all I did was ask for some honest opinions. And based off that, everyone is on my side, but he feels differently and has a different opinion. I mean, again, I said at the top of the comment that I made, if there's a consolation bracket, there's reasons that commissions will give to not make that decision for you. However, I think it's the right decision to award you Blake Corum. I think it is because, again, you are in the playoffs. He is not. However, I will say that at least Blake Corum cannot be used against you coming up when they play in the next couple of weeks. So that's the only solace that I have there. Start two flexes. Flex between Jaden Higgins, Devonta Smith, Christian Watson, Devin Singletary. Again, I like Singletary a lot. But again, the opportunities are going to be there. Like I said, right? The opportunities will absolutely be there for Tyrone Tracy, Devin Singletary, and the opportunities will absolutely be there for Ashton Genty. What they do with those opportunities is kind of dealer's choice. But we do know that Washington is pretty terrible. So it really is dependent on how many of those carries Singletary gets and if he falls into the end zone. Okay. Last week he had 12 carries, 3 targets, kick return yards, etc. The week before that, 14 carries for 47 yards. Week before that, 2 touchdowns, 16 carries. So I do think that he will be buoyed by touchdowns, as is Christian Watson. Devonta Smith, on the other hand, again, I think Devonta Smith is a good start for most people. And I think that when we look at this and we say, all right, let's apply the same reasoning that we have applied for most of the season here. We go to Devonta Smith against the Raiders. Devonta Smith has had some pretty shitty games over the last several weeks, guys. Not shitty games, but less than stellar games by his standard. 8 targets, 48 yards, 7 targets, 37 yards, 11 targets, 89 yards. The potential for explosion is there with Devonta Smith. So for me, I think Devonta Smith and Christian Watson are very comfortable starts this week. If you wanted to pivot from Devonta Smith into Devin Singletary, I would not fault you because I do think that you do get a little bit more touchdown upside with Watson and Singletary. But if you want that comfortable volume, I think that Smith and Watson are fine as well. What's up, Kenny? All's good here. Next, a little hurting. It's getting colder. It's getting rainy. We don't like that here in Pittsburgh. Which defense would you start this week between the Bears, the Niners, and the Bucs? I think I'd lean on the Bucs a little bit. For all the reasons that I've said earlier, the lack of, outside of Pitts, the lack of pass-catching opportunities, Pitts and Bijan, for the Falcons make them a little bit one-dimensional. And I do think that the Bucs can take advantage of that. While I don't think that they're absolutely exceptional plays, I think that I think the Bucs is a play that you can lean into this week. Now, when we look at the other side of that with the Jags, I think the Jags are the best play on the I actually think the Jags are the best play on the slate. Okay? So if you asked a defensive question and you wanted to know what defense would you pick up, it's the Jags. There is no reason to believe that the Jets will be able to move this ball at all. Whether Brady Cook, Tyrod Taylor, Justin Fields, et cetera, et cetera. A hurt Tyrod Taylor, they're already saying that they're going to start Brady Cook, okay? Or they're already thinking about needing to start Brady Cook. So to me, while the Jags are not exceptional at anything on defense, they can stop the run. And because Breece Hall is the weapon of choice, and Adonai Mitchell as well, I think you can lock this team down. And Jesse, it's the Jags for me. Anybody that asked about the Saints earlier, I have the Jags slightly above the Saints. And I definitely have the Jags above the Bucs. And I'd be furious too, Michael. So then he private messaged me, told me he needed the fantasy money after not asking since before the draft. And I assured him that although I am out of work and have difficulties, that you'll get him it. Yeah. I mean, I would wait. If he wants to toy around, I mean, you're giving him the money. That's cool. But like, I definitely have a problem. I definitely have a problem with the way that commission handled that. Wilson or Evans this week, Jose? So let's take a look. I think you got to, again, I don't think that Garrett Wilson is playing this week, if that's Garrett Wilson, so I'm on Michael Wilson. Michael Wilson, I'm not benching Michael Wilson, guys. I understand everything that we have said about the Houston's defense and everything we have said about wide receivers of Houston's defense. And this happened to Rashee Rice this week too, guys. I was a little bit hesitant on starting Rashee Rice this week as well for everything that I've said about Houston before. But again, like I'm looking at this and I'm saying that Arizona's run game is not there. They're passing a lot. And Houston is going to have to do a lot to make this not happen in the capacity that they want in their defense to play. So Michael Wilson is still the play, especially over Mike Evans, because this is Mike Evans' first week back. But there's always a chance that Mike Evans goes 2 for 20 for 2 touchdowns. So, I mean, there is that. But it's Michael Wilson for me, for sure. Quincy, would you start Luther Burden over Jaden Higgins? Right now, I start Jaden Higgins over Luther Burden. But if Roma Dunze is out, I can write a story. I can write a narrative where Luther Burden would be a good play. But right now, it's still Higgins. All things the same. They do have the same amount of opportunities per game. So it is much easier. When we look at the stats, it is much easier to pass. I just think that it's possible that in this matchup, Jaden Higgins does do very, very well. And I said that last week that I think that that's a possibility as well. So I'm still going to land on Higgins here. When we look at Baltimore, when we look at Arizona, they're 9th against wide receivers theoretically over the last 4 games. When we look at it, they're looking at like 132 total yards on average per game that they've been letting up. When you look at that over across the 4-game slate, that's 530 yards. CJ Stroud, while he's not exceptional by any means, there is a story that you can write where he will be absolutely fine in this matchup. Again, Arizona is allowing around 931 total yards to quarterbacks over the last 4 games, and that comes out to around 232 passing yards. So there's a story that you can write where Jaden Higgins is absolutely a great play this week. Again, it's something to keep in mind. Now he's messaging me for the money in my DM simultaneously as we speak about the issue at hand in the group chat. So just because he's mad, he does that. It's so passive aggressive. So passive aggressive. And it's my 3rd year in league, and he knows he's never had a problem with me paying. As a matter of fact, the first year after I won, I had to wait for a good portion of the money. And one damn guy didn't pay me the first year when I won and didn't get him to pay me until the start of the following season, 6 to 7 months later. Michael, sounds to me like this league is fun enough, but it might be an opportunity to move on the next year or to rally the troops and tell the commish that at next year's, this is what we do every year in my home league, right? Is every year we propose rule changes. One of the rule changes in my league that has been on the table for the last 5 years has been eliminating kickers and adding another flex spot. One of the rules that I am proposing this upcoming year is that I want to actually eliminate a couple of bench spots. Our bench is very deep. So when you guys are talking about waiver wire requests and who's all available on your team, Michael Wilson wasn't even an option this year. He was drafted. Luther Burden, drafted, kept. Amari DiMercado, drafted, kept, right? So there's too heavy of a bench so that when you have an injury, and we have an IR spot, so like you could hold a bunch of injured players if you want to all season, right? So for me, I'm going to propose while I still want to get rid of the kicker and add another flex, I do want to eliminate 1 or 2 bench spots because I want to make the waiver wire worthwhile, right? I don't want the only person on the waiver wire every week to be Emmanuel Wilson. So like Deep leagues, there's problematic in there. Hey, Pennywise, man. Welcome to Derry. What an incredible show. Has anybody ever seen Welcome to Derry yet? I've been hooked. We're caught up on all the episodes. Hey, it happens, man. And to have the commish come at you like that, I am not about that. If I was commissioner of your league, I'd have just given it to you. Would you drop Pierce for Burden? I probably would, Jesse. But I love Alec Pierce so much. And I don't think that they're going to game plan any differently for Alec Pierce. But with Riley Leonard, I'm just not sure if he will be able to force the ball downfield to Pierce. So maybe you wait a week. But yeah, I think that it's okay to pick up Burden. But the only reason that I'm picking up Burden is because of Rome Odunze's injury. So I'm also watching Rome Odunze's injury, and I don't think I can make this decision until I knew for certain that Rome is trending to out. Trone, I have McPherson. Would you drop him to pick up the Patriots, Borgales, the Rams, Mevis, or for the 49ers, Pinheiro? There's been a lot of chatter in our chat about Pinheiro all year. Not a lot about Borealis. And then we talk about Mevis occasionally as well. So let's look at the slate and let's see what the slate is showing us this week about kickers. I don't think that the New England kicker is a bad play. When I look at the New England kickers matchup this week, we're looking like it's going to be in New England. So I am closely monitoring if that game's going to have snow. If that game's going to have snow, color me out. The Rams kicker, Mevis, is probably who I'm going to go after. While I do think he has a floor of around 4 points, that's 4 extra points. So you're looking at about 28 points scored by the Rams, I think. When we take the projectable outcomes for this game and we look at what the implied point total is for the Rams, the implied point total for the Rams is 30. So how do you get to 30? Well, there's going to be potentially a field goal, maybe 2 field goals in there and a couple of extra points, right? So I think when you look at an implied point total like that I think it's fair enough that if you wanted to roll with them, that with Mevis, that you should and you could. The other kicker, Pinheiro, against Tennessee, I don't necessarily have to start Pinheiro, and there's a likelihood that they don't rely on Pinheiro a lot. So, yeah, I'm on Mevis. If I wanted to drop McPherson for Mevis, I would be okay with that. Again, that's very weather-dependent decision. Yeah, but I think I'm still on Mevis out of all of them anyway. Gino is doubtful. Should we pick up Kenny Pickett starting for Vegas? Would I want Kenny Pickett? No. But does Kenny Pickett know the Eagles? Yeah. So if you need like a backup quarterback and you're not planning on starting him, or you're in a super flex league and you want to pick up Kenny Pickett, sure enough. But I still would stay away from that. I would stay away from the whole Raiders in general. Gino was trending to be doubtful as of right now. So that's the other reason why I'm kind of staying away from Ashton Genty as well. Steve, I'm half PPR. I need 3. My man between Gibbs, Jalen Warren, Dowdle, and Genty. Well, you're not benching Gibbs. Gibbs always has that chance to explode, Steve. So I'm on Gibbs there. I told Michael all the reasons why I'm out on Ashton Genty this week. In your question, though, there's a slight chance that maybe Genty is the answer over Jalen Warren. Because when you look at this and you say, all right, going back to Michael's question, I just want to make sure we're on the same page there with Michael's question for sure. When we go up and we take a look at that question there, I really don't think that Genty is a play that I want to be on this week, guys. And I know that the matchup is good, 27 total or 20-ish opportunities, 25 opportunities there. But I just can't trust it with Gino. I especially can't trust it with Kenny Pickett. Okay. So I'm definitely not going to be on that bus. But again, Jalen Warren's opportunities are going to be cut, and the Dolphins don't offer a lot of opportunities to begin with. So for me, I'm definitely starting Dowdle, definitely starting Gibbs. And I think it's a coin flip between Genty and Warren. I think that Warren is more likely to score the touchdown than Genty. If you think differently, then you can absolutely start Genty. The opportunities should be there. But again, if the Eagles are able to generate a pass rush against whatever quarterback is there, that is going to be strictly problematic for Ashton Genty and this offense overall. So then Derek here, I currently have Warren in my tight end, but I picked up Likely. Who do I like more this week? It's Likely. Riley Leonard may play. So that's something to keep your eye on going into Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If Riley Leonard plays, Warren and Pittman get a slight upgrade. Okay. But still, Likely's in the best matchup on the slate right now. And the last time that Likely faced Cincinnati, Likely went off for 15 points, 5 receptions on 95 yards. It's very good chance that happens again. So I think it's very safe to say that I'm on Isaiah Likely. Dak against the Vikings, tough pass defense, or do I go with Purdy? Derek, we answered this question a little bit earlier. If you want more in-depth information about why Brock Purdy, you can take a look back in the episode. But I'm on Brock Purdy. It's not because the Vikings are exceptionally good at playing defense. We talked about this last week. Yes, it is the worst matchup on the slate for a quarterback, Jane Daniels. It was the worst matchup for Jane Daniels as well. The problem that I have with Minnesota in general is that you don't know what Minnesota offense you are going to get. Are you going to get the one from last week with Washington where they were able to produce points, or are you going to be getting the one against the Seattle Seahawks that were prior to that, where they got blanked? So I asked myself, with that amount of inconsistency, is Dak the guy that I want to lean on? Not necessarily. Caleb Williams, 193 yards. Jordan Love, 139 yards. Sam Darnold, 128 yards. No touchdowns because the need wasn't there. You could literally just run it down the Vikings' throat and be fine. And because Dallas with Javonte Williams can do that, I just don't think that Dak is going to be exceptional this week. So I am on Brock Purdy. Michael Wilson or Jameson Williams this week? I love this question. It's two of my favorite players right now in terms of, thinking about and talking about. Jameson Williams, the opportunities are going to be there. What I would want to look at to make sure, and again, I don't have all my coverage data right now, and we're strictly talking about this based off of potential total opportunities, right, is that there is a very good chance that this matchup, the Rams and the Detroit Lions, will be the highest scoring matchup on the slate. And you want to have pieces from the highest scoring matchup on the slate. Now, while the Rams have been pretty good on the total of the whole year against wide receivers, if you take it over the last 2 games, they've been pretty trash. And one of those games was against Michael Wilson. They've been averaging around 2 reception touchdowns. So while I really, really love Michael Wilson, and I want to find all the reasons to play Michael Wilson, I do like Jamo as well. So Shabu, I know this doesn't answer your question, but I want to start both of these guys. Who are you starting in place of them? And that will paint a better picture. Well, here's the thing, Michael. At least it's not Thursday, right? At least it's not Thursday. We're coming to you early today because Joe has some obligations tomorrow, so we won't be on tomorrow. But we will answer this last question from Zai. And Shaboy, if you want to tell me who the rest of your team is so we can make a really good decision here on Wednesday. And again, this information can change depending on injuries and what comes out. This is just a Wednesday look ahead, Wednesday opinion, right? Zai, deep dive, 12-man PPR, the bye was secured. Love to hear that. The QBs are Jane Daniels, Jordan Love, JSN, Lamb, Pickens, Myers, Debo at wide receiver. The running backs are Cook, Henderson, Sharps, and Mason. Goddard and Juwan Johnson as tight end. I don't trust either quarterback to win. Stroud, Sanders, Bryce are available. So, again, Jane Daniels is injured. I don't think, and we know that Jane Daniels isn't playing this week. Okay, it's pretty significant. And when we look at Green Bay with Jordan Love is an enigma. Like I said, there is a chance that he throws a bunch, and there's a chance that he doesn't. Okay. Playing against Denver, there's a chance that he could be exceptional, right? I just want to take a look 1 minute at a couple of players here before we make a final decision on this question. So when we look at Denver Broncos and we look at the schedule and we see who they've all faced over the last several weeks, I want to take a look specifically at this Marcus Mariota game, Geno Smith game, whatever. So in that overtime game, Marcus Mariota threw for 294 yards on 50 attempts. Okay. Against Vegas, Geno Smith went for 21 attempts. So obviously pretty inferior performance. Against Kansas City, they allowed Patrick Mahomes to throw the ball for 276 yards on 45 attempts. All right. Again, the Geno game, I'm not taking that into consideration. Houston, they allowed Davis Mills to throw the ball 30 times. All right. And against Dallas, they allowed Dak to throw the ball 31 times. So while you might not love Jordan Love this week, the opportunities should be there for Jordan Love this week against the Denver pass defense. Now, the problem with Jordan Love this week, right, isn't that he doesn't have touchdown upside. He does. It's the fact that the yardage total is a bit lower. And overall, Denver hasn't offered an exceptional amount of points to quarterbacks on the year. But again, that stat does come with 2 games against Geno, a game against Davis Mills, of course. But what I like is that I like those 36 pass attempts. If Jordan Love, if they decide to pass the ball a good amount, then that's going to be great. And in a game where Bo Nix is probably going to be shootouty, it's probably going to be more shootouty than you want to, I think that the opportunities are there for Jordan Love. If you wanted to pivot off Jordan Love's side and you wanted to pick up another one of these quarterbacks, I would lean into Stroud or Sanders. We talked a little bit about why CJ Stroud, because again, looking at total opportunities over the last 4 weeks, Denver has allowed on average 36 total opportunities. Arizona has averaged around 28 total opportunities because they do have a more fast-paced offense. When you look at this in totality, okay, that equates to around 72 pass attempts for quarterbacks over the last 4 games for Denver. You heard what those pass attempts were, right? And then Arizona, 57. So that disparity is pretty decent, but the amount of pass completions that Arizona has allowed is only within 9. So Denver's pass defense, while they're offering a lot of opportunities, they are limiting some pass completions, right? When you look at the yardage total for these quarterbacks, it's within 20, it's within 30, okay? And the same amount of passing touchdowns. So the matchup on paper is very, very similar if we were to pair CJ Stroud and Jordan Love, both with good rushing attacks potentially. So leaning CJ Stroud could be a good opportunity for you. Again, Shedeur, on the other hand, right? The Chicago Bears have allowed a lot of passing touchdowns, but not a lot of passing attempts, one of the lowest in the league over the last several weeks. They've offered even less pass completions. When we look at their total number of pass completions, it is bottom 12 in the league right now. Okay, so that is something to consider with Shedeur. He's not the most efficient guy, but he will or should have more opportunities. For me, and Bryce Young is not on the table. I'm still starting Love this week out of your choice. But if you wanted to pivot into Stroud, I think it's fair enough that you can because both project very similarly. The projections that I am getting here is sitting around, if we look at where the projections sit right now, Jordan Love is sitting around 15. And CJ Stroud also around 15. Ceiling, Jordan Love has a little bit of a higher ceiling. Just taking that into consideration. When we look at this question here, week 15 is bye, so Bears and Ravens for Love in week 16 and 17. So, Zai, when I take a look at those weeks, right? And again, as we've talked about before, the Bears matchup, as we just said, we just talked about why that Bears matchup isn't incredible, right? So Jordan Love on that Bears matchup, I don't really like it. Jordan Love on the Baltimore Ravens matchup, I don't really like that either. We look ahead and we take a look at what Houston's schedule is in week 16 and 17 for Stroud. Let me take a look here. Take a look at Houston's schedule for CJ Stroud. And what we're looking at here over the next several weeks is the Raiders and the Chargers. So coming along, looking at that schedule for the Raiders and the Chargers, let's take a look at the Raiders against quarterbacks over the last several weeks. And the Raiders have offered one of the highest pass completion percentages to quarterbacks, while they haven't offered as many opportunities. It's around 69 total pass attempts, or around 56 total pass attempts, okay? Because the Raiders are pretty haphazard in that capacity over the last 2 games. We stretch this out to the last 4 games, and what we see from the Raiders is that the Raiders have offered the least amount of pass attempts one of the least amount of pass attempts at 105, okay? Which is one of the lowest in the league in terms of pass attempts. But when we look at the completions, right, they're sitting up there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, top 12 in terms of completions allowed, with a passing touchdown number at 7 total. Okay, so while that's not incredibly exceptional from the passing market, right, is that it's something that CJ Stroud can take advantage of in week 16. Now, when we go to week 17 against the Chargers, we're looking at a Chargers team who has allowed over the last 4 games around, again, 102 total pass attempts with only 69 completions and 4 touchdowns. So that matchup is going to be slightly harder, but it should be more competitive knowing that these 2 teams are fighting for playoff spots. So CJ Stroud could be a start in week 17, but I don't think he's a start in week 17. I think he's a start week 16, though. Then we come down, Zai, and we take a look again at Sanders and Bryce Young. Now, when we look at Bryce Young and we take a look at the Carolina Panthers schedule, I think the Carolina Panthers schedule is something to take advantage of in week 17. Or in week 16, they play the Buccaneers. I think it's perfectly possible that they can do some good things against the Buccaneers week 16. That doesn't help you because we're thinking about week 17. We already think that Stroud is going to have a decent game week 16. So now let's take a look at week 17. Bryce Young versus the Panthers. I don't really like that. Then we take a look at the Browns schedule week 17. They got the Steelers. Steelers have been a little bit better against quarterbacks over the last several weeks, a little bit better against pass catchers. I don't really like that either. So if I'm going to start a quarterback week 16, it's probably going to be Stroud. If I'm going to start a quarterback week 17, I think I'm going to have to revisit that next week. See what the waiver pool looks like, and see what the decisions are based upon injuries and things like that, Cy. That's kind of how I would approach this one. Shaboy, it's tough to play Wilson. My wide receivers are JSN, Nico, AJ Brown. Yeah. Also, I'm stuck waiting on to start right if HN misses or start one of Javon. Oh, God. Yeah, I mean, if I'm deciding between Jameson Williams and Michael Wilson, both are hot right now, dude. Both are extremely hot, and I think that Jameson Williams does keep it going, and I do think that Michael Wilson does keep it going. So then the ultimate question that it comes down to is touchdown upside. So let's look into those markets at touchdowns, and let's see where that comes in at, okay? So over the last 4 games total, okay, the Rams have allowed 5 receiving touchdowns, okay? Raiders are sitting there as well at 5. All right, so that's looking good. And Houston is sitting down there at 2. So if you're looking at that market and saying to yourself, I want to get in on that, I think that that's fair to say that Jamo would be the guy that you would want to start. Again, we're looking at 18 targets, 15 targets, 6, and then back to 15. It's hard to bench a guy that's getting 15 targets in my mind. So I do still lean Michael Wilson on the volume side, but Jamo for some touchdown upside potentially. And if Wright, I do like Wright. I'd be on probably Wright and Javonte, but I do like Woody Marks over Brees. I'm not starting Brees this week, and then you guys hear every reason why. All right, guys. So thank you all for joining us today. We are Local Football Flavor. We answer all the questions that come in. If you have a question from now until Sunday, we aren't going live tomorrow. Joe has some things to take care of. So we are not going live tomorrow. That's why we went live today on Wednesday. We appreciate everybody joining in, jumping in. We answered all the questions. Good luck this week. We want to see you back next week with championship or with wins that we can start talking about this championship game coming up. We will also begin to start talking about playoff best ball as we roll down the regular season of fantasy football. So we will have content coming at you for sure. Next week, we might go back to Thursday, but it looks like we might be doing Wednesday again next week. So Monday and Wednesday next week, most likely. Watch it and make sure that we're not going on Thursday. We wish you the best of luck. Go out there, win. We appreciate everybody in the chat. Thanks, Cece. Like, follow, subscribe if you haven't already. Tell your friends or don't tell your friends if you want to win, right? So we appreciate it. We'll be back on Monday. We hope to see winners. Local Football Flavor out.